People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In Australia, an experienced bushwalker knows exactly what to do when he gets seriously injured after falling from a waterfall.
My leg had been totally snapped at the ankle. So I grabbed my walking poles, started to use them to splint my leg.
But he's out there alone. No one knows he's there, and he's just lost his only means of getting help.
In putting my phone in my pocket, I missed my pocket and my phone went straight in the creek. I have no way of telling anybody where I am, and now panic starts to rise in me.
In the UK, two 9-year-old boys are in danger of drowning under Blackpool's Central Pier at the start of the summer holidays, clinging to the razor-sharp girders with all their strength as the waves threaten to engulf them. A brave father of 3 risks his own life to save the boys, but can he reach them on time?
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear him crying. And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Can you contact Coast Guard, Northwest Ambulance? We could see members of the public had already gone into the water. We genuinely believed that day there would be numerous fatalities.
As one of the biggest storms to hit the UK and Ireland brought chaos to a coastal suburb of Dublin.
We'd never seen anything like that here before. There had been warnings on the radio about people swimming and reminding them, please don't.
But one local resident decided to chance it.
I just thought, she's not going in. Surely she's not going in.
And off the coast in the UK, a vintage plane with 2 people on board loses power. They're over the sea, but landing in water could be fatal.
Just heard the engine splutter.
Their only chance of survival is to find somewhere to land, and soon.
After the first splutter, then there was a failure, and that was the end of it.
In Queensland, Australia, a bushwalker's hike goes wrong on the side of a waterfall.
I start sliding and I just saw myself cartwheeling down the face of the waterfall.
Having suffered an injured arm and leg, the enormity of his plight soon sinks in.
I live by myself. I've told nobody where I am, and panic starts to rise in me.
Neil Parker was born in England, but raised on the other side of the world when his parents relocated the whole family to Australia. He's a native now, through and through, with a passion for the great outdoors.
I do a lot of off-track walking and go places that nobody else has been to, or very few people have been to.
Neil's sister Dawn, who lives several hours away, has mixed feelings about this particular hobby.
As a family, have always been a bit concerned, but at the same time I know that he has built up his skills and he is really good with taking care of himself. Where he does his bushwalking, there's no internet service, so I just know he's gone in and I know that he's come out.
One Sunday morning, Neil heads off alone on one of his favourite 3-hour hikes.
That day was just the perfect day to be out walking, and feeling really confident that, I'll be out in an hour and a half.
To complete the hike, he needs to scale the side of a waterfall.
I get to the base of what I know is the biggest waterfall on this walk. It's curved, but vertical, but it's got lots of handholds and footholds. I reach the point 2/3 of the way up to the waterfall and I start sliding, looking for grabs, finger grips, jug holds, anything to halt my momentum from sliding. I just saw myself cartwheeling down the face of the waterfall. I've hit the water, I've come to the surface. I start swimming, but one of my legs doesn't seem to be playing the part, and I realised I was badly injured. My leg had been totally snapped at the ankle. So I grabbed my walking poles, started to use them to splint my leg. I looked at my wrist, I had a long sleeve shirt on, but it just felt like it was sprained, so I wasn't overly worried. I got my phone out, turned it on, only to find out I had no range. So I thought I'll put my phone in my pocket and I'll try and make my way 30 or 40 feet down the creek. In putting my phone in my pocket, I missed my pocket and my phone went straight in the creek. I have no way of telling anybody where I am, and now panic starts to rise in me. I live by myself. I've told nobody where I am. The first person that's going to notice I'm missing is my boss Monday morning when I don't turn up for work.
Stranded, with no communication in the middle of the Australian forest, with no one looking for him, things are looking bad.
It's getting dark and I think I now have to find somewhere to bunker down for the night.
Later, Neil's hope of a rescue quickly fades.
This is not the right location for these guys to be able to find me at night, and I'm under deep canopy.
In Blackpool, in the UK, two 9-year-olds are desperately clinging on for life under the pier with the tide rising above their heads. The boys were so far underneath that they couldn't be seen, but luckily for them, a security guard heard their cries and raised the alarm.
CCTV to control. They've had a report from security at Central Pier of two young boys in the sea.
Whiskey Alpha 26 acknowledged the last. Could we have patrol start making, please? Central Pier. Can you contact Coast Guard, Northwest Ambulance and RNLI lifeboat, please?
In the police station, Sergeant Matt Walters watched the CCTV footage feed from the town cameras with mounting concern.
The CCTV control room made us aware that they'd had a report from security staff at the pier that there was two young boys in difficulty in the sea underneath the pier. It was just impossible to actually see anyone, which obviously made me and my colleagues here really concerned that there was two boys who weren't going to be getting out of the water that day. It only takes one wave to slam you into that structure and knock you unconscious.
Sergeant Walters can only wait and watch as the emergency services rush to the scene. The boys had been in the water for several minutes, buffeted by the waves, getting colder and colder. One of the people who noticed the unfolding drama was Paul Adams, who was on a day out with his family.
It was the security guards what I saw running down the beach at first. I was like, it's a bit strange. Some of our family members are down at the sea. When they came back, they said, oh, there's two boys under the pier, they're stuck. And at this time, one of the security guards had tried going and getting him. He came out and he was just saying it was too rough, he couldn't get to them. I just thought, me being a father as I am, I have to try. Just every now and again you could hear them crying when the waves had died down a little bit. It was something I had to do.
Under the pier, the boys were being thrown against the sharp girders as the sea became rougher and rougher.
You know, the adults were up to sort of chest and neck height at some points, and the waves were going over them. Yeah, we genuinely believed that day there would be numerous fatalities.
After multiple attempts, the security guard had failed to reach the boys. But Paul tried a different approach.
I didn't go swimming in like everyone did first. What I did, I walked in and I was bouncing over the waves till the point where I couldn't do it, where I couldn't touch the floor, and then I had to swim. But I stayed back a little bit and then I went again. And just let the waves die down a little bit to go in further and further every time.
The Coast Guards were on their way, but still hadn't reached the boys. Paul was getting nearer, but time was quickly running out.
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear him crying. And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Hi, you alright?
Yeah.
Did you have a good day at school?
Mhm.
What do you want to do? Do you want to make some butties for tomorrow?
Yeah.
For your packed lunch?
Yeah.
The Kitson family had recently relocated to the seaside town of Blackpool.
We'd just moved to the area. We're just finding our feet.
And Mum Claire was relieved that the children were adjusting to life here, including 9-year-old Isaac.
Isaac came home from school one evening with a little note asking was he allowed to stay at his friend's house. I was apprehensive because Isaac's never had a sleepover before anywhere, but I was also overjoyed because he obviously had this bond with this little boy. So he was jumping for joy. And then we gave him his tea. I walked him round to his little friend's house. I can't wait, Mum, I can't wait. I'm going to have a sleepover. And I had a little chat with Mum, and I'll see him tomorrow morning.
But the next morning, the children's plans for a fun day out were to take a disturbing turn.
I had a phone call off his friend's mum telling me that she couldn't see the children outside, but not to worry because they are on the bikes and, you know, they'll be back soon. Have they made the way up to me? I hadn't seen them, so I had to say, obviously, no, I haven't seen them, but I'll have a little look at the park, which I did. I went down and had a look. I couldn't find them. As I heard nothing else, presumably everything was fine.
But young Isaac would never forget what was to happen that day.
We wanted to go out and play some football and ride on our bikes. We saw these two boys I didn't know, my friend did, and he said for us to follow them. I didn't know where I was going, I was just following them.
Isaac and his new friends ended up at the beach, where their games became more dangerous and involved going into the water.
We walked over, we put our feet in up to our shins, and then there was a big wave, and then the wave took me over and then pushed me back out. I couldn't swim, and the waves were proper strong.
With both boys unable to swim, they were now stranded and in extreme danger.
We could see members of the public had already gone into the water, wading in the low tide, looking for these boys. It's very brave. Going in the sea at any time, whether the water's calm or rough, is dangerous.
But Paul was determined to save the boys.
It was rough, but I was doing it and I was coming out with all of us.
Isaac and his friend were struggling to hang on any longer as the cold and the buffering took its toll.
I was panicking and I kept on bobbing up and down. 3 seconds down, 2 seconds up, and kept on struggling, feeling like I might die.
Later, Paul knows the boys are minutes away from drowning and he needs to act fast.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
In Ireland, a woman ignores warnings to stay out of the sea during a ferocious storm.
I just thought she was going to just maybe dip her foot in and turn back, but she didn't. She went in.
Prompting a dramatic race to save her. Dublin in Ireland is known for its enchanting coastline, and it's home to Fiona Dunley and her family.
I moved back from Manhattan and discovered this area, and thankfully met my lovely husband, and we bought this house and we've raised our children here. They go to the local school.
And there's an added bonus to the area.
We have the sea. It's just incredible. Every day the colours are different, the sea is different. I just love watching it, just staring at it, swimming in it. I just love it.
It's also where Dublin lawyer Philip Lee takes his exercise.
I swim every weekend, so I walk down to Sandy Cove. So it's a lovely area to wander with the dogs or with friends. Terribly pretty to look at and it's awe-inspiring. It's lovely.
Both ended up involved in a dramatic rescue during one of the UK and Ireland's recent infamous storms.
Middle of a storm, beast from the east. We'd never seen anything like that here before. There was no cars on the road. There was nobody out. It was a complete shutdown. We'd had a couple of days indoors, but after about 3 days of that, we'd started to get cabin fever, so I suggested we go for a walk.
Not far away, Philip and his family had the same idea.
I wandered down with my daughter Lara and my wife Una down to the 40-foot because I am fascinated by the sea.
The 40-foot is one of Ireland's most famous outdoor swimming spots. It's a headland in Sandy Cove, County Dublin, and it's attracted swimmers there for 250 years.
You will get literally thousands swimming in that same venue, snow or rain or hail. So to see somebody swimming in the very cold weather is not in the least bit unusual.
But with the might of the beast from the east, this was not the day for a dip.
There had been warnings on the radio that morning about people swimming and reminding them, please don't.
As Fiona was about to discover, one lady's radio had clearly been on the blink.
We got as far as the seafront and it was really windy, the sea was crazy, so the kids just wanted to turn back. I decided to go on because I wanted to see, take some photographs, take some videos of the sea. Just out of the corner of my eye, I see a lady starting to walk down towards the water, and I just thought, she's not going in, surely she's not going in. And so I kept filming.
By this stage, Philip's walk had taken him down to the same place.
I saw a woman in the little harbour, and I suddenly saw her move out to the exit of the harbour.
It was obvious, the waves, they were just starting to pull her, and she wasn't strong enough.
Anybody in that sea did not have a possibility of survival.
It was really scary. That lady was in serious danger.
Philip knew he needed to do something.
Immediately I go, let's get a life ring and let's get her. If she can hold a life ring, she can be pulled in against any tide. Swimming, once you're in the maelstrom, you don't have a chance. Two other gentlemen actually had a ring in their hands and they were very close to her and they threw the ring to her then. She couldn't grab that ring, so I then threw the ring immediately because time was going to be critical.
Luckily, this man took over and he moved so quickly.
I threw the ring and the ring landed past her. She was then pulled towards the rope and she grabbed the rope.
It was incredible that he was there at that moment.
Another gentleman also grabbed the rope that I threw, and we both then pulled the rope until she grabbed the ring. So we steadily pulled her in, and then she came in towards the slip. We then got down to the slip, dropped to her knees, but just make sure she got the last bit and helped her onto the slip. And then she ran, obviously, to get herself warm and dressed.
It was an awful thing to witness, but I'm so glad she was okay.
And with the woman unharmed, for Philip, who had acted so quickly, recognition for his heroics came later that day.
By the time I got home, I then went out for a drink that evening, and total strangers in the pub came up and said, "Oh, are you the person that rescued that woman in the sea?" And I was a bit taken aback by that, but pleasantly taken aback. No one objects to being thanked for doing something.
A vintage airplane is in trouble over the UK coastline with 2 people on board. The engine has stalled and they're falling out of the sky. The pilot needs to make an emergency landing, but the only option is on a beach full of holidaymakers.
So I braced myself and just hoped for the best, but I actually thought, OK, this is where we're going to land.
Zach Rocky is a 47-year-old airplane enthusiast from Devon and has been flying planes for 17 years.
Passion for flying goes back a very, very long time, since literally before I can remember. It's what I'm about. I love it. I love how they work. I love how they operate. I've got to understand how they operate, aerodynamics, what keeps them in the air, and I always knew I was going to fly.
One of Zach's favourite planes is this vintage 1930s French light aircraft.
I love the look of it when it's together. It's a head turner. It's a nice machine to be in. It makes you feel quite good about yourself being inside it, in the military colour scheme as well. It's an open cockpit aircraft, and just to be bimbling around over the Devon countryside, looking out the window, counting swimming pools is wonderful.
Trudy Spiller is also a vintage aviation enthusiast from Devon and has been flying with Zach for 3 years.
I will do any adventure, I will go anywhere and try everything once. Zach normally is quite a wacky, off-the-wall character, full of beans, a joker, just fun to be around. But when he gets into the aeroplane, he's a mature Zach, and you feel safe in his hands, and he's very professional.
The pair had made plans to visit a special vintage air show.
I'd been invited by Bodmin Airfield. There was an event going on down there, and they were marking the end of World War I. Asked if I'd like to go down. I've known Trudy for quite a while, and I phoned her up and said, it's actually going, the weather looks fantastic, I will be taking it there, would you like to come along? And she said, yes, please, let's go and do it. She hadn't had an open cockpit experience before. She really wanted to have that experience and come along for the day.
They set off from their hometown in Branscombe, enjoying the flight in the open cockpit plane.
I was never once nervous. A lot of people will say, no, I'm not going up in one of those. But for me, I didn't think like that.
The conditions were really good, actually. It was the first sunny bank holiday of the year, and it was incredibly sunny throughout the whole weekend. We got really, really lucky with the weather.
So we got the sort of lunchtime and hung out. You literally show off your planes. There are numerous others, other people with them there. And then we thought, nearing 4 o'clock, we thought we'd decide we'd head on back.
So, after an enjoyable day at the air show, the pair set off on the flight home.
And on a bit of a scenic trip, was gently make our way back and taking the whole Jurassic coastline all the way. It was stunning. It's a beautiful flight home.
Everything was well, we were enjoying it.
But things take a dramatic turn on the final stretch of the journey.
Just heard the engine splutter once and thought, OK, he's just slowing down maybe because we're going to have to go up on an incline soon.
I first noticed it, I think, same time as Trudy did, actually. It was around about as we came round the edge of Budleigh Salterton. I put on more power for the climb out. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. It didn't increase the RPM as I was expecting it to. And then I started to think, though, there's an anomaly here. So I put in full power, and it didn't quite do what I wanted to do, so I backed off of that and just thought it would cruise on. And we did cruise on for a bit of a ways, and then there was a bit of a splutter.
Do you know land on the beach? East Coast.
And then after that, after the first splutter, then there was a failure, and that was the end of it.
Then it cut out completely. It just went silent, and then you're gliding. At that point, I looked back at Zach and said, Zach, in a worried way. He didn't answer.
We couldn't talk to each other, obviously.
There was nothing I could do to help.
At the point of complete failure, the best reaction, and my own instinctive one, which I was quite happy about, is don't panic. That's pretty much the best thing to do at that point. Panicking is not going to help anybody.
It's at this moment that Zach has to make a snap decision. One wrong manoeuvre could end in disaster.
It started spluttering and I chose somewhere. Then I did what I could, and then when everything failed, I already had a plan. Because getting it wrong can either kill me or somebody on the ground. Inland was not an option. It looked uncomfortable. There was a lot of trees, forestation.
All Zach can do now is head for the nearest strip of land, a beach.
It doesn't sound good, does it?
No, he's landing on the beach.
So I braced myself and just hoped for the best.
But yeah, after some seconds, you see if it's settled quite nicely into its glide. I was like, okay, yeah, I can make this. It was at low tide, so it was a nice sandy area there. Good runway, so to speak. As I got closer, there was a couple of people that I spotted.
I could clearly see there were people on the beach, about a handful, and with that I could see they were looking up to us and coming towards us with their mobile phones on, probably thinking, oh, this is wonderful, they're doing a nice low a flyover or something.
I think I need to...
Wow.
Later, Zach faces one of the biggest challenges in his life when he makes an emergency landing. Meanwhile, back in Blackpool in the UK, two boys stranded in the Irish Sea, fighting for their lives and desperately praying for help.
I thought I was strong, but the waves were obviously stronger than me. I was thinking, I'm gonna die.
Then, Isaac made one last effort to save himself as he remembered something his mum had taught him.
She taught me kick your legs and hold on to something.
Luckily, the pier leg was within his grasp.
We grabbed onto the thing what holds the pier up. I told my friend to keep on moving along so there's more people that side so they could try and help.
Spurred on by the boys' cries for help, Paul was all the more determined to get further into the water and to rescue the boys.
I didn't know where they were. I just could hear them crying, and I noticed Isaac being on the outside of the pier, so I got him first. Isaac was holding on to the pier leg, and I said, right, come on, we're going now.
For Isaac, it was looking like his nightmare might be coming to an end.
He picked me up and then brought me along.
Isaac held on to me like he never wanted to let go of me, like. He just couldn't let go of me. He'd held on so tight. When I came out with Isaac, I gave him straight to Paul, who's part of our family.
With Isaac safe, Paul went straight back in to help rescue the other boy.
As I got to the other lad, I had to swim out to him because he was a lot further out. He tried grabbing me straight away, and I'm like, just 1 minute, let me just get my breath. Got my breath, I went, right, come on, we go. But I've come back out and there was someone in the water who took over the second child.
The second man was the security guard who had raised the alarm. The boys had narrowly escaped death because of the bravery of those involved.
Had the security guard not heard the cries for help, had there not been security working that day on the pier, had it been a bit of a quieter day in Blackpool midweek maybe, we genuinely felt from watching the footage that it would have been a different story had them members of the public not acted.
We stayed on the beach for a little bit longer, sat there talking about what had happened, and everyone was like, I can't believe you just done that. I'm like, no, neither can I. It It was a few days after it actually hit me that I'd saved 2 boys from drowning. So, yeah, and I actually cried.
In the Australian outback, a bushwalker finds himself in serious trouble after falling from a waterfall.
I was badly injured. My leg had been totally snapped at the ankle.
Worse still, nobody knows he's out there.
Panic starts to rise in me. I've told nobody where I am.
But the alarm was raised when he didn't show up for work the next day, and his sister Dawn received a call.
On the day that I found out that he hadn't turned up for work, I was at work myself, and I knew straight away that something is wrong. The lady beside me at work, I just went up to her and touched her on the arm, and I said, "My brother's missing." She took me to the nearest police station. They took all the details. The police helicopter went out, but they didn't find anything. That night, I did feel that maybe he might have died.
The next morning, police handed the search over to Air Rescue, a division of the Queensland Government. Greg Beer was on duty.
He didn't have an emergency locator beacon with him, so we weren't getting any signals. It was really a needle in a haystack.
In the outback, Neil knew he would need to play a part in his own rescue. He had already crawled over 3 kilometres of terrain with a broken leg, but he must push on and find a clearing.
I dragged myself the last 50 metres across the rocks to the gravel road track.
We were 10 minutes from deciding to go back to base and refuel, where our rescue crew officer in the back of the helicopter sighted something. It was Neil, and he had a colourful type jacket, and amazing that we saw him.
And he flew straight across overhead, and I thought, hallelujah. Elation, I guess, still now. It's still a very teary moment to realise that I've been found, and all my effort to get to this location has worked.
Time was critical. We set up for the winch then. It was quite a tight area to put our guys into.
When the helicopter came back to load me into the stretcher, and then when the stretcher was taken off and I was in heaven, I thought, wow, I've been rescued, I'm going home.
Neil's ordeal is finally over, and his family received the news they've longed for.
They found him. It's such a relief. We just went straight up to emergency, and straight away someone let us know that he was all good, that he has badly broken his leg and his arm, but she told us that he managed to drag himself to a clearing that was 3 kilometres from where he had fallen. It just blew me away.
And when I woke up, my sisters were there. It was bloody fantastic to see them and be able to give them all a hug and a kiss and thank them all for being there.
Back in the UK, Zach Rocky and his friend Trudy had been on their way back home when their vintage aircraft suddenly lost power.
Heard the engine splutter.
The time has run out and they can't avoid an emergency landing.
Something wrong. People, you better clear the beach.
But they're heading towards the beach and a difficult approach.
So it was a sudden bang and then boom, boom, boom along some other rocks and the sand.
The left wingtip's very, very close to the pebbles, a lot closer than I thought it was going to be.
Wow!
Touched the left wheel down first because it was a real steep slope, and that really sunk into the stones. It's almost like a quickstones instead of quicksand. I wondered initially whether it was going to grab the wheels and flip us over. Massively adrenaline at that point.
And when we'd actually landed, I think that's when it all hit home. What I'd perhaps been through was the enormity of it.
I was bizarrely unfazed. And then getting out after, sort of got a bit of jelly legs. I was like, oh my God. Judy and I walked back up the landing to get away from people. To the point of touchdown, almost kissed the ground. Thanks for letting me back on.
People on the beach are quick to alert the Coast Guard, and station manager Terry Waugh is the one who took the call.
Our initial tasking came in as a ditched aircraft on Jacob's Ladder Beach, and that's all we had to start with. It is very vague. You're thinking all the way down, I think, oh, what are we doing? Have they crashed? Are there injuries? Until you get there, you don't actually know what you've got. I could see with binoculars that the two people were out of the aircraft. That was great. The aircraft was still in one piece and upright, which is something we didn't know about until we got there. It could have been upside down. Check that there's no injuries as such. Also checking for shock. The pilot seemed fine, but the passenger was a bit quiet. So we just talked to the passenger, make sure she's okay. If the tide had been in, he wouldn't have been able to get down onto the beach. There wouldn't have been enough room. If it had been midsummer, there would have been too many people on the beach. He wouldn't have come down then. Probably his only option would have been to ditch in the sea. The incident could have turned bad very quickly. If he ditched in the sea, there would have been injuries, possible fatalities.
What started out as a fun day out for a pair of aviation enthusiasts ended up in a major rescue operation that could have been so much worse.
I think I've since realised how precious life is and every day matters. Never been in danger before, so this is the first, hopefully last experience.
When you go to an incident and you get a good outcome like that, nobody's injured, it's a good feeling.
The availability of the beach was literally still wind. We could not have put together a better scenario for it to have gone wrong. We got lucky.
Thankfully, no one was injured, and even the plane survived intact. Today, 6 months after their crash landing, Trudy and Zach meet up with Terry the Coast Guard, who rescued them off the beach.
Terry.
How are you?
Terry, nice to see you again. You too, sir. You too. Remember Trudy?
How are you?
Yeah.
Just, I can remember. I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Was you expecting to see this sort of an aeroplane there?
No.
There you go, yeah.
When you see a plane, I think, oh my God, we got a passenger airline.
That's right, yeah, quite.
Amazing bit of flying. Because you wouldn't have known until you got down level with the beach, the sort of slope on the beach, would you?
No. I was hoping for the sand. I was aiming for the sand. Right. That was the flattest part. Yeah. But the 4 or 5 people that were there, they went to the shoreline. So it was like, I can't do that anymore. Stones. But yeah, we got away with that one. Beach wheels, that's what I call them from now on. I do. Yeah, there's not many aircraft I think I could have actually made that with, apart from this one. In fairness, yeah, some of the other things I've flown, they weren't going to manage that, not at all.
When I heard the engine cut out, that was all. That's when I knew that wasn't right, you know, and the spluttering. So, you know, I sat there, and not at any point did I think, oh, this is it, I'm going to die. I knew Zach would get it down. I really kind of phased out, and that was my first experience of shock, probably.
Yeah, it's like you said, you were in shock. You just wanted to sit down, and everything comes flooding back to you, what you've just done and what you've just been in.
Yeah, and I was shaking. And when I first I went on a flight again with Zach, that stomach, the feeling came back, to be honest.
Yeah.
Are you having fun, though?
Oh, fun.
And she went over and touched the airplane and gave it a little stroke. And I even said I offered her if she wanted to go flying again. I think she might do. She might do, in this aeroplane.
Maybe one day I'll sit in as a passenger again.
Earlier, we saw 9-year-old Isaac saved from drowning under Blackpool's Central Pier. Now fully recovered, Isaac and his mum have forged a bond with Paul, the man who carried him to safety.
Hey up.
Hi, Paul.
And they meet up on a regular basis.
All right. You good?
Yeah.
You all right, yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
How are you doing?
Bit mad being back here.
Yeah, but it feels strange, doesn't it?
It does. It does a little bit, yeah.
Well, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be sitting here with Isaac.
Yeah.
I think it was a brave thing you did, risking your own life when you've got your own family. You know, you just went in and got them, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. That's going above and beyond.
The main thing was getting you out.
Yeah. I can't sort of comprehend the fear that obviously the children must have been going through, and the relief when they saw you, you know, coming in for them.
The sound of the children crying, it
was enough to prompt you to go in for them.
You could tell they were scared when I got to them. They wouldn't let go, and all they kept saying is, "Don't let me die," and stuff like that. And I weren't planning to. Like, looking down now and seeing children in the water, the parents are nearby, but they don't understand how quick the tide comes in. That day, the tide came in so quick, it was unreal. Think a little bit more about if I couldn't have got to them, what would have happened, and then I went through a point where I was thinking, perhaps I might not come back out.
Yeah.
There'd been 3 of us.
Very scary.
How do you feel about being down here?
It's all right, but I'm still got a fear of the water. But
It'll take time, but just a little bit at each time, innit?
Yeah. Thank you for saving me.
You're welcome. Just don't go playing in the sea.
I don't think he's going to play in the sea again, are you? Hey.
An extraordinary decision taken in a split second on Blackpool Beach by Paul changed the fate of 2 little boys forever.
I'd never done anything like this before, or anything like that. It's not like something like I'm a superhero or anything like that. It's actually hit me a little bit talking about it, that it were that close to, if I weren't there, they wouldn't be here now.
Overwhelming, grateful, emotional to the man that pulled Isaac out, and thankful that I can spend the rest of my life now with my son.
Paul's heroic actions on that day mean all 3 now share a bond that will last a lifetime. People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. Terror in midair as a commuter piloting his own plane loses power.
When the engine lost power, I was also right in front of a large water body.
8,000 feet above the Canadian wilderness, the situation takes a nosedive.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. At that point, that's when I heard a loud explosion.
Search and rescue have been mobilized, but it won't be that simple.
The terrain at the rescue scene was rough terrain.
And worse still, locating the crash site will not be easy.
I realized very quickly that I did not have my GPS on me. I knew I could be in the woods for days.
In the UK, a local animal lover was surprised to find that a dolphin washed up on their beach was still alive.
We've never had a live dolphin stranding. We needed to move him.
As more rescuers joined, they knew the clock was ticking, but moving the creature was looking unlikely.
It was a very large dolphin and very heavy, and for the two of us by ourselves to move that would have been impossible.
A woman on holiday in Bali takes a terrifying fall into a volcano during a nighttime hike.
I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that.
With no emergency services in sight, it's down to her fellow hikers to help as her life hangs in the balance.
It was scary, especially because she had hit her head. Time was definitely critical.
She was turning blue. I had nothing to actually treat her injuries. I was pretty certain that we were going to lose her.
In the UK, a young boy's pet dog has disappeared without a trace.
I was upset. He's more like a brother to me.
My dad rang me in floods of tears, we can't find the dog. My heart absolutely sank because he means so much to Josh.
2 days after he disappears, the young boy's sister received devastating news.
Well, someone reached out to us and said they'd seen a small black collie get knocked by a car.
And this will mean a race against time for a local search and rescue volunteer.
Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide, and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end. He was in desperate need to be found.
In Canada, the pilot of a light aircraft has noticed a problem during a morning flight.
I noticed my engine settings, they were slightly off, and these settings are never slightly off.
His engine was failing, leaving him in a mid-air emergency.
That's when I heard a loud explosion and saw a tree actually penetrate right through the bottom of the airplane.
Commuting to and from work can be dull, but for American Matthew Lettinen, it's something he relishes.
So I fly a Cirrus SR-22. It's an American-made aircraft, single engine.
13562 for 9 number Sarah, good day.
So that morning I was excited to fly because it's a very rough, remote, but beautiful part of the world.
Matt was getting ready to commute from the mine he owns in Canada to his family home in America.
When I arrived to the airport that morning, there's a standard procedure for a pre-flight check. Check the fuel sumps, check the oil level to make sure there's nothing that stands out as being irregular on the aircraft. The checks were acceptable, given the weather conditions were lovely, beautiful. Everything was checked off, ready to depart. Departure that morning from the Wabush Airport was standard. I was climbing up to 8,000 feet. I've flown up to the mine site probably 6 times, but I was very excited to fly out that morning to see the scenery, to see our mine from the air. I had about 20 minutes of time after takeoff to climb up to cruise altitude and to communicate with air traffic control.
3000, 9 number, sir.
And then I was in cruise flight, very smooth flight. After about 20 minutes, I noticed my engine settings, they were slightly off. And these settings were settings that are never slightly off. I knew something was very wrong.
The aircraft was unresponsive, and Matt knew he was in danger.
Okay, welcome aboard, guys.
My heart immediately started pounding through my chest. I could feel a flood of adrenaline. The first thing I did was radio the air traffic control, let them know I had something wrong with my engine. I'm trying to fly the airplane with my left hand. I'm trying to put the GPS in my pockets in my right hand, and also talking to air traffic control at the same time.
But we are ready to pick up the ATIS to Toronto.
I started checking which airport would be the closest one to fly to. I was in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest airport was still 25 minutes away from my current position at that time.
But Matt wouldn't make it there.
All of a sudden, I could immediately feel that the power was gone. The airplane was starting to slow down. At that point, I knew the engine was done.
His aircraft was in real trouble.
When the engine lost power, that was another huge shot of adrenaline. I don't recall very clearly the communication I was having with air traffic control. I remember trying to relay to them my GPS position.
As fear set in, Matt must act quickly.
I was right in front of a large water body. I did not want to crash into the water. And I remember looking down, trying to find, as flat an area as I could to set the airplane up over to pull the parachute.
Even though the plane's safety parachute had been deployed, he was still in trouble.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. I just remember looking straight ahead, seeing the tips of the trees start to come underneath me. And at that point, that's when I heard a loud explosion. I saw a tree actually penetrate right through the bottom of the airplane. A moment later, I was on the ground.
Having survived the crash, Matt was about to begin another fight for survival.
The first thought I had once I hit the ground was get out, get away from the airplane in case there's an explosion.
I just had to pull the cap's parachute. I'm in the middle of Quebec.
I could see that I was cut on my leg, but I felt fine. I'm breathing very heavily, I'm sweating, and I was just trying to calm down, to try to think, what do I got to do next here to survive? I was about 65 nautical miles from the nearest human being, so I knew that it was very important for me to establish communications with somebody. I knew that if I did not find my GPS device, that would likely and almost surely be fatal for me as well.
But his GPS was still in the plane, and it was dangerous to go back.
With the plane in the distance, I can see fuel leaking out the wings, so I'm gonna stay a safe distance away until I know all the fuel's leaked out.
It took me a while to work up the courage to go back to the plane.
The fuel is largely drained out.
The GPS was sitting on the seat.
He could now start a call for help.
I'm in the middle of Quebec, trying to get my SOS to work.
I had prepared ahead of time to get the proper email addresses of where I could send these messages. The first thing I did was enable the SOS. Quickly started messaging both NAV Canada and my father so that he could pass it along to everyone else that I was okay. I was not getting confirmation that they were going through.
With no acknowledgement of his messages, Matt decided to try and find a place where he could get a better signal.
It took me about an hour to hike up a hillside to find a clearing where I could actually successfully send and receive messages.
Later, the reality of his situation sinks in.
Help was on the way, but it was hours away.
In the UK, a dolphin stranded on a local beach was found to be still alive, prompting locals to launch a rescue mission.
We were constantly keeping that supply of water over its body, doing what we could, and knowing that time wasn't on our side.
In the UK, Shoreham Beach in West Sussex is popular with locals and visitors. It's also home to a variety of marine wildlife, something members of the local community are passionate about, including Joe Snow.
For me, the main reason to volunteer was because I'm a diver and I'm an open water swimmer, and I love all things associated with the sea.
And her skills as a marine medic were needed when a dolphin was discovered stranded on a local beach. Without knowing its condition, Joe headed to investigate.
There were some superficial injuries. He'd moved around on the pebbles and got some grazes on his tail fluke.
Injured but still alive, Joe knew every second counted to get this creature back to the sea. But she also knew she would need help and called on fellow animal lover Pete Foggan.
I got down to the beach, and as I got here, the head office called just to say that ideally like a vet on site as well to come and check to see if the dolphin was ready for refloating or any injuries.
In the meantime, the pair needed to protect the creature.
We tried to stop him getting further damage by putting some blankets underneath him. It was also quite important to keep him cool.
Beach Patrol Officer Robert Dove had also received a call from the Shoreham lifeguard.
Bravo, this is Worthing Base. I got the call midday that there was a beach mammal. Okay, won't be long. I prepped for that, got the towing gear out, expecting the worst, and extra towels for hydration, saturation of the mammal.
By now, a local vet had arrived and was assessing the dolphin's condition.
The vet checked the vitals, all seemed good. The size and the weight of the animal was healthy. There wasn't any damage as to why it had beached up. There wasn't any injuries, any netting damage on the body. So it was a green light to try a re-release.
They would need to move the dolphin to a calmer area, half a mile away at Shoreham Harbour. But moving this creature was not going to be easy.
It was a very large dolphin and very heavy, and for the two of us by ourselves to move that would have been impossible.
It was a very windy day, so there were quite a few kite surfers around.
Local resident and keen kite surfer David Donald was one of them.
It was a sunny day and I was with some mates. We were asked to come and assist the beach dolphin. I've never seen one on the beach before, so it was pretty unusual. Originally, they wanted to carry the dolphin to the harbour, which is a few hundred metres. So I don't think it would have been that easy to move it because it's probably 150, 200 kilos.
There's a lot of weight there. We did have a large rug with a lot of muscle around it, but that was still a challenging ask.
But David had a moment of inspiration that might just work.
As part of my event business, I've got a big mat, so I suggested it. They said, yeah, so let's give it a try. So the guy from the beach patrol who was there on his quad bike, he gave me a lift back to the house to grab the mat.
Later, with the dolphin having been stranded for 2 hours already, will David's plan to get it back to the water be in time? In the UK, a young boy is left devastated when his best friend goes missing.
Me and Dad decided to go out searching for him. We kept looking around, but we couldn't find him.
The boy's sister has heard that the dog has been hit by a car.
It was absolutely devastating. Just the thought that he was hurt somewhere and we couldn't really get to him.
And concerns for his welfare were mounting.
Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide and sit it out, and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end.
Dogs are a man's best friend, but for one young man in Wales, his dog Socks means so much more.
Socks has changed my life a lot. He's more like a brother to me. He always runs around. He's sometimes a bit of a lunatic, and he's so fun.
Socks was brought into the family to help Josh at a tricky time in his life.
Josh relocated down to South Wales to live with us when his mum got ill. It's quite stressful starting in a new school, new friendship groups, new area.
It was quite difficult because I didn't know a single person. Socks has made life a lot easier because it's just socialising with people and stuff and having things in common. And Socks is one of them.
And their instant kinship is something the whole family couldn't fail to notice.
I would definitely say Socks is Josh's best friend, and it's vice versa as well. Socks doesn't want to be with anyone else but Josh.
Sadly, though, this came to an abrupt end.
My dad rang me in floods of tears. We can't find the dog, I don't know what to do. My heart absolutely sank because he means so much to Josh.
I was quite upset, but then I thought maybe he would come back, find his way home.
We put a few posts on social media. Someone reached out to us and said they'd seen a small black collie get knocked by a car, which then just meant everyone's heart sunk.
This same witness also contacted specialist search and rescue volunteer Jamie Jewell.
I run Mad Dogs and a Welshman Doggy Daycare in Swansea, and I'm also a volunteer pilot for Drone SAR for Lost Dogs. Drone SAR is a volunteer search and rescue group with both drone users and ground crew to go searching for lost dogs.
All the while, though, Josh and Hayley kept up their search.
Me and Dad decided to go out searching for him. We started calling his name and stuff, and we kept looking around, but we couldn't find him. It was quite a hard couple of days.
Josh really struggled and he just wanted to be out looking every single day. Trying to keep him calm throughout the whole process was quite difficult.
But in the background, Jamie was getting ready to start a search. He knew time was against him.
It was 2 days after the incident had happened. My impression that the dog wouldn't have been eating or drinking in that time, and potentially with an injury that could be bleeding, he was in desperate need to be found. Quite often they try to find somewhere to go and hide and sit it out, and unfortunately never come out, and that would be the end. I was told the location. I knew what area I was going to search on that particular day.
And later, knowing how inaccessible a location would be, could Jamie's drone have the advantage? A woman on holiday in Bali takes a terrifying fall into a volcano during a nighttime hike.
I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that.
With no emergency services in sight, it's down to her fellow hikers to help as her life hangs in the balance.
It was scary, especially because she had hit her head. Time is definitely critical.
She was turning blue. I had nothing to actually treat her injuries. I was pretty certain that we were going to lose her.
John Conway works as a firefighter, and it's a job he's passionate about.
I've been a firefighter for about 8 years. Obviously, it's not day to day that you get to go out and save people's lives. Every day is different, and you do get to do good in the community. And no matter how cheesy that sounds, I think that's why everybody does it, really.
Dorina Agaci, originally from Romania, now lives and works in Dublin.
I work as a paediatric nurse in Cromwell Children's Hospital. I always liked helping people. I know it's very cliche, but it's true. I also really enjoy traveling.
As fate would have it, both John and Dorina booked a trip to Bali, all set for an adventure.
So I decided to go to Bali on holiday, but I also wanted to do something while I was there. So I volunteered with an organisation to do healthcare education with kids.
One of the main reasons I wanted to go to Bali was the famous Mount Batur volcano. I heard that the sunrise treks were actually phenomenal, so that was a big part of why I booked to go there. I was really excited to do it, although we were up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
It was busy. There were a few groups there. The guys did warn us that the terrain was quite bad. It was very slippery.
Once I got to the top, there wasn't actually a great deal to see because it was pitch black and we were all just sat there waiting to see the sunrise. And I heard a woman screaming just behind me, and that's when I realised that someone had fallen into the crater.
We just all heard a very loud scream. At that point, all the tour guides just left us and they went into the crater. And they said that someone had fallen in and that she's bleeding.
John was keen to help, but he faced problems he'd never come across before.
She was 40 metres down and I'm on my own. I've got no first aid kit. I've got literally nothing. It's just me stood there in a vest.
Regardless, John put his own life in danger and began the descent.
It was only as I was getting towards the base of the crater I realised the height she'd fallen. There's no way she could have made that. She probably fell 20, 30 metres and then she would have rolled to the position I found her in. It was quite apparent that just looking at the fall, she had spinal injuries.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
John was shocked to find not only had she survived the fall, but was still conscious, although her injuries were a real cause for concern.
The fact she was still talking was insane, really. She had quite severe trauma to her head. I believe she broke her back in 2 or 3 places, broken ribs. She had some open fractures to her legs as well.
Back in the group above, unbeknown to John, Nurse Dorina Agaci was anxiously awaiting news of the woman's condition.
To be honest, I assumed the worst because I thought if somebody did fall in, it was probably going to be a really bad outcome for them. I mentioned to them that I'm a nurse and if they could take me there. I kind of went into autopilot. I didn't even think about it. It was just natural to just go and help.
After a precarious climb down into the crater, Dorina finally reached the woman and was a welcome sight.
She introduced herself. She said she was a nurse. She said she could help, and I've never felt such relief.
She had a few injuries that we were very concerned about, especially because she had hit her head. She had a big cut on her forehead. It was scary. I felt like I could do more, but I didn't have anything to help her with.
Realising they were out of their depth, and with the woman's condition fast deteriorating, they asked the guides to call in the emergency services.
Our first instinct was to ask about a medical helicopter, and the guys were looking at us like, what are you talking about?
One of the main concerns for me was any of the injuries that I couldn't see, what was going on inside of her body, because everything that I'd done was pretty makeshift. And that's when I was thinking, we need to move and we need to get her out.
Later,
get the dog out.
They need to get the woman to hospital through the difficult terrain.
At points, we were holding her above our heads. Yeah, it was quite challenging, really, just carrying a person, let alone ourselves down them slopes.
Flying over the Canadian wilderness, Matt Lettonen's light aircraft suffered engine failure.
You see the treetops getting closer and closer. That's when I heard a loud explosion. And a moment later, I was on the ground.
After a crash landing, Matt used his GPS to send out an SOS, only to find he wasn't getting a signal.
It took me about an hour to hike up a hillside to find a clearing where I could actually successfully send and receive messages.
Luckily, Matt's hike had been worthwhile. His call for help was heard by the search and rescue team led by Nicholas Brouard.
Our role as search and rescue teams is to respond to emergency in remote location where anybody else can't go.
But any rescue attempt would take time.
We were about 2.5 hours of flight from the rescue scene. So there's a lot of things involved when we show up for a mission like this. We do some checks on the aircraft, we check our equipment, and then we start the helicopter and we're ready to go airborne.
Back at the crash scene, Matt's hopes were raised when he saw a spotter plane overhead.
I was getting feedback that there was an airplane overhead and I could hear an airplane overhead. I was being told that they could not see me. So I returned back to my base camp, quickly started a fire. It made a lot of smoke.
Come on, boys, you just flew right over me. Come on, get me, boys.
I received a message about 15 minutes later that they had spotted the smoke.
Matt's relief was short-lived. This giant Hercules was first response, and the rescue helicopter was still a distance away.
Help was on the way, but it was hours away.
But the spotter plane had dropped a radio, giving Matt a direct link to the search and rescue team.
It was out of a scene of a movie where they fly over and all of a sudden you see this little parachute just floating down to earth and with a large buzzing sound.
And drop the radio for me.
The most glorious moment was not just finding the radio, but as I walked up to the radio, I could hear the search and rescue tech calling out my name.
The helicopter was reaching the crash scene. A rescue attempt was now in sight.
Matt sent a precise location of his position with a GPS. Because of that, the radius was narrowed and we were able to locate him pretty fast. The forest was dense, but there was a parachute on a tree. We were able to see the parachute, the plane, and Matt from the aircraft.
Waiting below, Matt had started to believe that he might be finally out of the woods.
Once the helicopter arrived, that was yet another feeling of joy, of optimism that this thing is coming to an end.
When I went down on the cable, I was just 30 feet from the aircraft, so I was able to see Matt.
The helicopter was overhead, the wind was incredible. As I got pulled into the helicopter, I'm just feeling joy. I'm just feeling very grateful that I'm sitting in this helicopter, and I was just in awe of them.
On our way back from the plane crash, Matt was really grateful. He shakes our hand.
Had I not been rescued in that relatively short amount of time, 5 hours, certainly at some point I would have perished from dehydration.
I was surprised. I've been on another mission where the airplane looks less broke and the patient more injured, and I was really glad to see that he wasn't injured.
But Nicholas firmly believes that Matt's rescue was partly down to his own actions.
If Matt didn't have a GPS or any kind of mean for us to locate him, we could have been searching for him for days.
However, it's the rescuers in the sky that Matt feels he owes his life to.
All the people that assisted with my rescue from the Quebec forest that day are my heroes. I'm grateful for the service that they provide. I'm grateful for the risks that they take to spend their lives to save one life.
I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to have an impact on someone's life and make him able to come back to his family.
You'd think that going through such a traumatic event may have clipped Matt's wings.
I'm happy to say I went flying yesterday for the first time. There's a little mix of anxiety, a little mix of excitement, but my first flight back in the air went very well. Where I should be dead in the woods right now, and how do I make the best use of my life going forward, if nothing else to honor the gift and the sacrifice and in gratitude for all the rescuers that helped get me out of the woods.
In the UK, rescuers are astonished by the condition of a dolphin that's been left stranded on one of their beaches.
When I went there when the dolphin was very alive, I was a little bit shocked and surprised.
To keep the mammal alive, they must act fast.
You've got to make sure that they get into the water.
But to get the 400-pound creature to the water is not going to be an easy task.
He did have a large rug with a lot of muscle around it, but that was still a challenging ask.
By this time, the dolphin had been beached for 2 hours, and locals had offered their help in getting the creature moved.
I've got a big mat, which I use for moving hot tubs. It's called a spar sledge.
We put that plastic roll mat against the side of the dolphin, and then everyone together, working in sync, lifted and rolled the dolphin onto the mat.
We hooked the sledge up to the quad bike that he's got and went across the beach with it.
The journey must have taken 10 to 15 minutes, looking at close to a kilometre.
The dolphin was actually not stressed while we were moving it. I'm not sure if it had gotten tired from being beached so long, or if it perhaps just realised that we were trying to help.
The team continued to do what they could to keep this creature alive.
We were keeping the hydration levels up, so we were constantly keeping that supply of water over its body, hoping for the best, doing what we could, and knowing that time wasn't on our side.
But when they finally reached the harbour and released the dolphin into the water, the animal did not swim off as hoped.
It's a group of people holding the dolphin upright in the water, refloating it, just to allow it to sort of get its orientation back.
We initially tried to release it, and we removed the blankets, and it toppled over to one side.
To come this far and see the dolphin perish was unthinkable. But just when they'd lost hope, there was a breakthrough.
15 minutes later, it decided it had enough and it wanted to go, so we just dropped the blanket and it swam off.
I didn't hold too much hope, but to my amazement, it survived. It had done a few laps and then found its flippers, shall we say, and steadily made its way out the harbour.
This extraordinary rescue was only possible with the community coming together. The dolphin's survival was thanks to them.
I don't know if it would have survived if we hadn't had some people there with that specialist knowledge. It's not something that happens every day on shore and beach, that's for sure.
Doing a great job together, really. Everybody sort of pulled together as a team. It was good.
Yeah, adrenaline was flowing. It was good to have been part of something which had a success story at the end.
Totally elated. I had a real lump in my throat when he swam away.
Back in the UK, a young boy's pet dog has been missing for 2 days.
Kept waking up having bad nightmares.
Despite searching high and low, there have been no sightings of him.
We started calling his name and stuff. We kept looking around, but we couldn't find him.
But the young boy's sister learned that the dog had been hit by a car.
Just the thought that he was hurt somewhere and we couldn't really get to him.
Meaning the clock was ticking for the rescue mission.
Potentially with an injury that they'd never come out, and that would be the end.
Jamie was about to get a breakthrough in the search.
After looking through some hedgerows, I noticed something white.
Back home, Josh was trying to stay positive.
I kept going to school thinking that maybe Dad would call me and say, we found socks at last, and it was quite difficult, and I was just trying to get my head down in school, and it was just impossible.
Jamie was going to do the impossible, but it wasn't going to be easy.
I flew the drone in closer and realised then that it really did look like the dog that I was after. And so I dropped the drone lower and lower to get a positive identification, and once I realised it was the dog, I could see there was slight movement, so I knew he was alive still. Given that it was only my second or third actual search out for a dog, I got very, very excited, quite emotional to be honest as well.
Jamie's elation soon changed to fear.
The dog was closer to the road than what I was, so I didn't want to get any closer with the drone until I could form a barrier between me and the road. The most thing that was panicking me was if I tried to make my way through, was he going to bolt?
Locating socks was one thing, convincing the injured pet to come with him, another.
When I first actually got close to him, he showed interest, but there was obvious injury to his front leg. I offered my hand out. He was coming up to my hand for a sniff, and then I popped a lead on him, and he got straight up. He got straight up and was happy to come out as well, so probably as relieved as I was.
A successful rescue, but not knowing how bad his injury was, Jamie wasted no time in reuniting socks with his owners.
I contacted the person who found me on Facebook to get the details of the owners, and then I made arrangements to drop the dog back.
By now, Josh was about to get the news he'd been so hoping for.
I was texting Dad, and then Dad said we found socks. Dad didn't tell me straight away that he got hit by a car. It was quite upsetting, but at the same time I was kind of glad that, he was back home, and I was really with my best friend.
Hayley rushed Socks to the vet. She wasn't sure how badly hurt he was.
We had a series of x-rays and they found out he'd broken the main bones in his arm. They just said that he was really lucky that it wasn't worse, considering that a car had knocked him and he'd been out in the wilderness for a few days on his own.
But it's Josh who feels like the lucky one, and he has Jamie to thank for it.
I thought it was kind of cool that Jamie found him with a drone.
It is a really nice feeling knowing that you've made a big difference in someone's life. For Josh in particular, this dog was his best buddy. Makes it all worthwhile.
Without Jamie, we wouldn't have been able to find socks. I was so glad that we had the family back together again.
In Bali, a woman is badly injured at the bottom of a volcano.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
She'd been given treatment by two fellow holidaymakers, off-duty firefighter John from Birmingham and nurse Darina on holiday from Dublin. But it's vital they get her to hospital if she's going to survive. But the first problem for John and Darina was to get her out of the crater, which was looking impossible.
Being in Bali and being in a volcano, there was no ambulance coming to help us. There was no paramedics. There was someone who brought a first aid kit, but the equipment they had was a piece of wood to use as a splint.
So me and John were like, we took a moment and kind of a deep breath and like, okay, this is the situation and we need to, do our best with this, yeah.
That's when a board got magically brought down. It was one of the biggest reliefs of the day, really. So we had a method to actually move her and get her out safely.
But with the severity of her injuries, it was crucial they make the long journey back down without causing further trauma.
Luckily, with my job, we train to actually move people, keep them in alignment and isolated, so that helped, and I literally had to talk guys through how to move her.
If she's going upwards, someone needs to have under here.
And get her onto a board as safely as possible.
But the difficult terrain meant they needed as many hands as possible to help.
There were a lot of people there and we needed all of them to carry her from the crater. That was the most difficult part.
I looked around and we found the shallowest point of the crater. We couldn't just carry her out, so we ended up linking arms, and there must have been probably 30 of us. We pretty much dragged each other out while keeping the girl as flat as possible.
They were all holding the stretcher kind of on their shoulder. Because the terrain was so bad, they had to be very careful when they were walking. So we kept telling everyone to go very slowly. Obviously, the communication wasn't great.
So we had to try and keep her as flat as possible, but obviously the incline was intense, really. At points, we were holding her above our heads, and yeah, it was quite challenging, really, just carrying a person, let alone ourselves, down them slopes.
And the physical aspect of getting her out wasn't their only worry.
In front of the girl, we were both very calm and professional. To each other, we did say this can go in a very bad direction very quickly, so we were both, I suppose, aware of that.
As we were going up, I kind of dealt with the carrying and manoeuvring her while Darina was kind of assessing her airway, her breathing and circulation and making sure she was stable.
After a difficult hike to the base of the mountain, there was a glimmer of hope as an ambulance was waiting for them.
It took about 5 hours to get her up and down from the volcano. And then we were greeted with an ambulance.
I thought, okay, we've made it. She's in safe hands. And I wanted to do kind of a handover to the ambulance staff.
But their sense of hope was short-lived.
We realized that there was only a driver there. There was nothing in the ambulance. And I was expecting at least something, some medication to, help her. There was nothing there. So I just looked at John and said that we have to go with her to the hospital. If we brought her this far, something can happen on the journey.
And there were more challenges to face on the 2-hour drive to hospital.
Yeah, the journey in the ambulance to the hospital was pretty horrendous. We ran out of oxygen. The seats that I was on weren't bolted down, so I had to tie the girl down with my hoodie. She was in incredible pain. I recall me and Darina were holding her hand on the way, and telling her that how brilliant she was doing.
After the epic trek and drive, they finally reached the safe haven of a hospital.
So when we got to the hospital, I was finally happy that she's safe. We just collapsed on the nearest chairs, and we were both starving and exhausted.
On returning home, they learned the woman had recovered from her accident, and her survival was in no small part due to John and Darina's help.
I actually get goosebumps really looking back on it, but as I landed in the UK, I actually got a message off her. Throughout the journey, I was saying, "Hi, my name's John, I'm a firefighter, I'm a brummie." And her first message to me was, "Hi John, firefighter from Birmingham." Naturally, I welled up. Just all the emotions of what we'd been through, and she actually said, like, we'd saved her life. It was like, wow, like, it kind of hit home really what happened then.
I was actually happy that I was there that day because I felt like me and John were supposed to be there for a reason. All three of us, we went through an extraordinary experience with a very, I suppose, positive ending.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In Hawaii, a rising star in the world of volleyball takes a step too far on a hike to a waterfall.
I just noticed she was getting a little too close to the edge.
I couldn't see very well, and my right foot came out from under me.
And she will have to fight to prove doctors wrong and keep her career.
Everything that I'd worked so hard for was just gone like that in an instant.
In the UK, a home invasion sees a husband fight off 3 masked men to protect his wife.
You sort of see this sort of stuff on TV. You don't expect 3 armed men in your home.
A paraglider pilot has crashed into a cliff on the Dorset coast. He's left hanging on for his life with a 500-foot drop below him.
My friend has crashed his paraglider into a cliff.
The rescue services are on their way, but they have only one clue to his location.
The caller mentioned that the paraglider was stuck about 20 metres below a tree.
And in the crystal clear waters of the Bahamas, a free diver makes a near fatal error.
We weren't really careful of the depth. I just used up too much fighting the fish as I was down there.
Leaving his brother to try and save him from drowning.
Just one thing on my mind, go save him.
In Hawaii, a woman slips and falls down a 50-foot waterfall. Friends who witness the fall fear for the worst.
I have to be prepared for any circumstance that I might encounter. She could be alive, she could be dead.
Heather Friesen, a professional volleyball player, was based in California when an exciting opportunity came her way.
I got a scholarship to play at the University of Hawaii. I'd never been to Hawaii before, and I was really excited to go.
And it was there she met her adventurous friend, Austin Ackery.
We just hit it off right from the get-go. We started sharing each other's stories and developing a really strong and deep connection.
He was just such a happy, cheerful person that we instantly became friends, and he loved hiking, so we would go on hikes together.
When Austin suggested a group of them hike the Cow Crater Trail in Honolulu, Heather jumped at the chance.
It was one that I'd never gone on before, so I was really excited, and he said that a couple other friends were coming.
The Cow Crater hike is up to the ridge of the Ko'olau Mountains. We couldn't pray for a better day. This blue skies, minimal clouds overhead.
When we got to the beginning of the hike, there was a sign that said something like, Cow Crater Trail, hike at your own risk. But we all just kind of laughed at it and said, no, we'll be fine. We're just going to keep going. I also remember saying, man, my season starts in a week. I better not roll my ankle or something because my coach would be really mad at me.
The group continued climbing, keen to reach the top of the waterfall as fast as possible.
The climb to the top of the waterfall wasn't all that difficult. It was fairly short, probably took no more than 5 to 10 minutes.
Having climbed, the pair admired the scenery, but Heather's enjoyment was about to be cut short.
Whoa. I really just wanted to take a look over the edge of the waterfall because in my mind I thought, how many times do you get to look over the edge of a 50-foot waterfall?
I just noticed she was getting a little too close to the edge.
There's this little trickle of water that was kind of in the shadows that I couldn't see very well. And so my right foot, unfortunately, just happened to step right on that. Whoa. And it came out from under me. I remember looking and seeing this little ridge that I could put my left hand on.
I yelled out, Heather, hold on.
I tried to grab onto that ridge, but that was too slippery as well.
I remember seeing her tumble down, and it was not a pretty sight.
I kind of curled up into a ball. I needed to land on my left side because I'm right-handed, so that's my hitting arm. So all of those thoughts were going through my head as I was in the free fall. I hit the rocks and then I kind of fell into the water from there.
But the pool of water wasn't deep enough to break her fall.
The water at the bottom of the waterfall was only about knee height.
Austin raced down to the bottom.
I have to be prepared for any circumstance that I might encounter when I find her at the bottom of that waterfall. She could be alive, she could be dead.
But he wasn't prepared for what he found.
She was standing up, and I thought that was so bizarre. How could somebody that takes that kind of fall, how could they be standing up?
I just used what energy I had to stand up and walk over to the side of the waterfall.
Even though Heather was moving around, Austin knew she could still be in danger.
That's when other members of our group came down. I just told them, keep her awake. We do not want her falling asleep. We do not want her going unconscious. We want her awake and communicating with us. Do whatever you need to do to keep her conscious. Stay there, stay there. Stay there, don't move.
After calling for local emergency services, a helicopter was dispatched.
They kept telling me to just take deep breaths and that the helicopter was going to be there quickly.
Due to the remote location, the Honolulu ground paramedic team was also dispatched. With them, Don Takara.
She couldn't walk. She couldn't walk out of that area, so they needed to airlift her out.
By this stage, Heather's adrenaline had subsided and pain had taken over.
I need somebody down here to help me out.
My whole left side felt like it was immobilized and like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe very well. It felt like my left lung was sort of like wet, crumpled up tissue paper. When I first heard that helicopter, I was so relieved. I just knew that I was gonna get to the hospital soon and that they were gonna start fixing me.
But the helicopter couldn't land there. Instead, a cage was sent down to airlift Heather to waiting ground paramedics.
Fire up to our location, which is a mile or two away from their location.
As soon as I got through the trees, that was the most peaceful moment that I've ever had in my life. Which sounds crazy because it was amidst all this chaos, but I just felt so calm and I kept repeating to myself, God's got me, I know I'm going to be okay.
The paramedics were also surprised at how okay Heather seemed, but they must now consider internal injuries.
We've noticed there was crepitus in her chest, indicating that she had a punctured lung, basically.
Riding over those roads is when I really started to realize what kind of pain I was in.
Because her fall was so high, it was critical that we got her to the trauma center as soon as possible.
Finally, in hospital, the true extent of Heather's injuries were revealed.
They told me that I had 10 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a fractured scapula, which is my shoulder blade. And I had a couple really deep wounds that they had to stitch up.
With Austin now by her bedside, there was more devastating news to come.
The doctors told us the extent of her injuries, and from what you could tell, Heather would not be playing volleyball ever again.
I remember being so devastated, crying really hard because, man, everything that I'd worked so hard for was just gone like that in an instant.
But Heather was to defy the doctor's predictions.
It was the beginning of a very, very slow recovery process, but now I'm back to full strength and competing at the professional level, so it's just amazing.
In the UK, a paraglider has crashed into a cliff with a sheer drop of 500 feet below.
Catch your rescue.
He's been up there for nearly 2 hours and exhaustion is setting in. Help is on the way, but they are worried they will not reach him in time.
I look at the information on my phone and it said crashed paraglider, stuck on the side of the cliff, Thorncombe Beacon. Basically, the 3 pieces of information you really didn't want to see.
"28-year-old Joe Redmond is a self-confessed adrenaline junkie.
My old hobbies were kite surfing and a couple of other things, but I decided, right, I'm going to go and find something. It's either paragliding or base jumping.
And having trained at a paraglider school, he got his wings and he was up and away.
Normal flying was a little bit slow for me, so I kind of like started to play around with the wing, and I really found acrobatic paragliding. It's kind of like it's like a boy racer of paragliding.
But it was his love of flying close to the wind which was to put him in grave danger when he decided to travel down for a day's paragliding with his friend Seb to the spectacular cliffs of Eat Beach in the UK.
The weather was going to be really good, blue skies and blue sea. Good travel distance east and west down the coast with plenty of height and beautiful views.
With high expectations for a fun-filled day, Joe was raring to go.
Mentally, I was prepared for the flight. It was very simple. I wasn't doing anything new. I had just gone over places and been places I've been before. So getting my equipment out, I just made sure everything was the same. It was good to go. It was in working condition. Taking off and landing is the most dangerous part. Crashing normally equals hitting the ground badly, so yeah, taking off, you have to be pretty careful. You've got like people surrounding you with their wings laid out, ready to run off the edge of the cliff, and the wind will give you enough energy to help you pull the glider up, guide it into an overhead position where you turn and face out to sea. Make sure you're in a good posture and you leave the hill and you're airborne. So my friend Seb had taken off before me, and he'd already managed to do a small circuit out to the left of takeoff. So when I took off, he was behind my right shoulder, and as we came up together, I looked to my right, and I can see Seb, you know, maybe 15, 20 feet up and to my right.
I know, come here!
We normally talk to each other in the sky, so we're flying up and down, talking and discussing, and kind of not showing off, but you're kind of enjoying your company.
After an exhilarating morning in the air, Seb and Joe decided that it was time to come back to terra firma and grab some lunch.
So me and Seb had both decided over lunch that it might be a good idea to try and race back to takeoff where we had initially started. Seb has a faster wing than me, so he had the advantage, gave me the privilege of taking off first.
How far forward is it?
But quite quickly, Seb overtook Joe in the race, and this changed the dynamics drastically, putting Joe on a flight path to disaster.
As soon as I'd realised that Seb had overtook me and I needed to make some distance, I tried to cut a few corners out of the terrain. Unfortunately, when I was flying past Thorncombe, trying to catch up with Seb, one of my instruments had fallen down beneath my seat. So in my effort to retrieve the instrument, I had gone down to pick it up, and this had led me to swing into the cliff. And when I looked up and I realised what was about to happen, I leaned away. It was too late, I was going to hit the cliff. When I hit the cliff, the first thing that hit the cliff was my left side. My elbow swung in, my hip swung in, and my wing had then scooped onto the cliff edge, essentially grabbing the cliff and keeping me safe. I was now just hanging onto the rock, which is a lot better than a situation where you're half falling, half flying, you know, and I was lucky to be conscious the whole time as well. Just needed a moment to get over the pain, and then a moment to just go, well, where am I? Like, what is going on? So I started to look at how high I was. Where were people? Did they see me? I looked at the ground. I was like, okay, so I'm 25 meters up. I looked at the top. I was like, okay, so I'm like 15, 20 meters from the top. Am I gonna try and climb down? Am I gonna try and climb up? Am I gonna just sit here and play safe? Is the paraglider about to slip and I'm gonna fall anyway? It's very loose rock, not good to climb on.
As he looked up, he spotted something that might help.
I could see a ledge above my head that gave me more of a platform to stand on. It was a place where I could reevaluate with more time. There was a part of me that kind of felt more secure climbing than I did trusting the paraglider to hold my weight up. So I had climbed 2 meters from where I got stuck in my seat, and I'd found this ledge. It must have been maybe 2 square feet wide. It was a small ledge, just enough for your 2 feet.
Later, are Joe's rescuers a little too close for comfort?
I couldn't see it. It managed to come around the corner, and I was very aware that if it literally had flown over me, because of how delicately balanced I was, it was going to blow me off.
A young couple faced their worst nightmare as masked men entered their home.
By the time I'd got to the top of the stairs and looked down, I saw men in balaclavas at the back door of my property.
With his wife ill upstairs and heavily outnumbered, a husband decides to fight back to protect her, no matter the cost.
One of them pulled out which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
Loved-up couple Charlotte and Asif Ali live with their dogs in Rochdale near Manchester, in the UK.
Me and Asif have been together for 11 years, married 8 years this year. It's an amazing thing to find a man that treats you as his queen. It might sound a little bit cheesy, but when you find a person who just adores you as you are, You know, you can't ask for anything more, really.
Asif works as an entrepreneur in the local community.
I own a few small businesses within the town. I'm in clothing and also an estate agent's.
And following a successful day at work, Asif headed home as usual.
We had dinner together. Charlotte said she wasn't feeling too well. I had a call booked with one of my clients.
We are normally together for most of the evening until we go upstairs to bed. It was unusual that I wasn't with Asif downstairs in the property that night. So I went upstairs and thought I'll put some TV on first and just relax, and then I must have just drifted off.
While Charlotte rested upstairs, Asif began his video call to his clients, Carla and Jamie Showett.
Hi Asif, how are you doing?
Nice to virtually meet you at last.
We were on the call for about an hour, both of us with Asif. He was sat in his kitchen and he had the dogs in the background.
9:15 in the evening, the dogs started barking. We had the patio doors open so the dogs could just freely come in and out of the patio.
But soon the dog's barking was to turn from playful to panicked.
When the dogs hear a noise outside, they'd run out and bark, but this bark was totally different. They'd run out, barked, and then sprinted back into the house, and then aggressively barking like I've never heard anything like it.
And suddenly, mid-sentence, Asif just pushed his chair backwards, stood up with a kind of puzzled expression for a split second, and then launched himself over the table.
Asif?
And nothing could prepare Asif for what he was about to face.
I expected it to be foxes, but, you know, I walked around the corner and someone stood there head to toe in black.
Charlotte also quickly became aware of the strange noises downstairs.
Woke up to the dogs barking. Got up out of bed, and by the time I'd got to the top of the stairs and looked down, I saw men in balaclavas at the back door of my property.
With no time to consider a plan of action, Asif launched himself towards the intruders.
My first instinct was to protect my wife, so I just went in towards him. He threw a punch, which I ducked my head, and then I just literally laid into him.
With the video call still connected, Carla and Jamie could only listen in shock as the drama unfolded.
Okay, Asif, hello?
We couldn't really see a lot, but we could hear everything. Well, it started off with, what are you doing? Why are you here? What's going on? And then it was just confusion, everyone shouting at the same time.
Very confusing for us. We just stood there staring at the screen, just saying to ourselves, oh my God, oh my God.
And the situation was about to turn even more dangerous for Asif.
Pinned this one man against the wall, and with the corner of my eye, I seen another one walk in. So, still holding the first man, I sort of flew into the second one. At this point, I turned, shouted up, Charlotte, phone the police and barricade yourself in.
I went into the back bedroom, I closed the door behind me and phoned 999.
Meanwhile, downstairs, things were going from bad to worse as he was becoming heavily outnumbered by the intruders.
I had the one pinned, and then the second one, I managed to grab him as well, and that's when I seen the third one come through the door. It was just surreal, you know. You sort of see this sort of stuff on a film, you know, on the TV. You don't expect to be facing, you know, 3 armed men in your home. So I sort of let go of the 1 and 2 and 3 punches the third one.
For Carla and Jamie, it was like a real-life horror film, and they felt helpless.
What do you want to do? Do you know where they live? Where they live?
Hold on, let me just check quickly.
You could tell that there was actually a physical fight. Yeah, there was sounds of scuffle, footsteps banging.
Felt like we were powerless to help them.
Charlotte had managed to call the police, but all they could do was wait in terror as the fighting continued.
I told them the address and said, there's 3 men with balaclavas that had just entered my home. All that was going through my mind was that something was going to happen to Asif, and, you know, that itself is enough to, you know, terrify you.
And we didn't know what happened to Asif, whether he was still alive.
Later, with Asif heavily outnumbered by the attackers, things take a more dangerous turn.
One of them pulled out which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
While trying to bag a prize fish, a spear diver in the Caribbean started to get into trouble.
I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, you know, everything went wrong.
His brother, also in the water, knew he had to do everything he possibly could to save his life.
He's gonna drown if I don't get him. Just go and save him. I'm just like, Danny, breathe, Danny, breathe.
Breathe, Danny! Breathe, Danny!
Millions of tourists opt for the glorious surroundings of the Bahamas every single year. And it's where Alex Mullings and his brother Danny spent most of their childhood. It's also where they developed their love of the sea.
I love the water since I was a kid. I have been doing fishing since I was 14 years old.
Me and Alex started diving about the same time, you know. He had a few months on me, and that was pretty significant because, you know, I was a rookie just starting out, and he was able to guide me along and help me out and help me to get better.
The brothers share a close bond and a healthy sense of competition.
Donnie and I would do just about everything together.
We'd always try to see who's the best. Anything he did, you know, I'd try to be better than him.
After getting to grips with fishing, they were both in search of their next pursuit.
We just got tired of fishing and we wanted to try something a little bit more challenging. I fell in love with spearfishing.
Spearfishing is where you just hold your breath, you have a snorkel and you have a mask and you survey the underwater and you look for your next meal, you look for a fish.
Free diving means the brothers can only stay below the surface for a limited amount of time before they need to rise for more air.
Generally, my dives are anywhere from a minute to a minute and 30 seconds or even sometimes 2 minutes.
The brothers were separated when Danny went off to study in the States. Their new pursuit would have to wait until the Christmas break.
I had just gotten back from university and we were pretty eager to go out and, you know, do some spearfishing.
And Alex was keen to plan a trip that they'd never done before. It would turn out to be a trip that they would never forget.
The night before, I've been looking at spots that we maybe didn't dive on that looked good.
As soon as the first light was up, we drove to the pier where we have our boat docked up.
It was my dad, my sister, and my brother.
The party headed out to a location neither had been to before, and it wasn't long before they saw a prize.
When we drove over this spot, and we saw like a grouper, and we were like, okay, well, let's see if we can get that grouper.
Both knew they had to prepare, but neither knew how deep they were about to dive.
We weren't really careful of the depth. Before any dive, you want to take in as much air as possible before you go down.
You have to be very conscious of the speed that you're doing and the energy that you're burning in chasing this fish. We jumped in and we started our hunt.
Danny was determined to bag this group of fish and went back down alone.
Danny went down, he dove on one hole and then he swam around to the other hole and he checked it.
It was pretty deep, I want to say about 70 feet. And, you know, I went down all the way to the bottom. I stayed down for quite a bit.
What must have been going through his mind was, okay, I don't see the fish, so let me head back up. Then I see him stop and he starts to deviate.
Danny may have lost sight of the grouper, but caught sight of a bigger prize.
As I was gonna come back up, I saw this nice hogfish and I just had to shoot it.
I see the hogfish that he's stalking, and then he lines his shot up with his pole spear. and he shoots a hogfish.
Danny had got his prize fish, but at what cost?
You know, I just used up too much fighting the fish as I was down there and trying to swim back up.
He starts to come back up with the hogfish.
And I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, you know, everything went wrong.
When he got like midway, he started to lose control.
It was just the lack of oxygen in the body.
I'm thinking, oh, what is he doing? You see like bubbles, he loses motor control, and he begins to sink.
As soon as I hit the surface, that's the last thing I remember.
Later, Alex faces a desperate battle to save his brother from drowning.
Like, my mind was just dive, get him, come back up.
Back in the UK, a paraglider pilot has flown into a cliff. He is 500 feet up with a sheer drop below. But he has found a small ledge and is hanging on for dear life.
So I had climbed 2 meters from where I got stuck. It was a small ledge, just enough for your 2 feet.
Having secured himself, all Joe could do was wait for help. And luckily, his friend Seb had made a call.
Catch and rescue.
Hello. My friend has crashed his paraglider into a cliff at Thorncombe Beacon. He is stuck on literally the side of the cliff, probably about 20 meters from the top. There's a tree at the top, 60 meters from the bottom. So he's looking at a very nasty fall. And he doesn't have a very big leg.
Okay, that's great, mate. All right, cheers, Sam. We do have assistance coming.
The call came through to Jake Lanning, the Deputy Station Officer for West Bay Coast Guard.
Just after 6 o'clock, the pages went off. I had a look at the information on my phone, and it said crashed paraglider, stuck on the side of the cliff, Thorncombe Beacon. Basically, the 3 pieces of information you really didn't want to see. The Coast Guard tasked 2 teams to respond. That was West Bay team and the Lyme Regis team, and they'd also tasked a Coast Guard rescue helicopter. There are no roads up to Thorncombe Beacon, so we travelled as far as we could on the main roads and then drove off-road the rest of the way.
But when they arrived, they couldn't see anything and didn't know where to look. Luckily, when Seb had phoned, he had mentioned a vital fact.
In the 999 call, the caller mentioned that the paraglider was stuck about 20 metres below a tree. There are no other trees up there apart from this one right near the edge of the cliff. So we set up our rescue equipment above that tree.
The Coast Guard helicopter had also arrived. Not a welcome sight for Joe, who had been hanging onto the cliff ledge for 2 hours and was starting to feel exhausted.
I heard it, I couldn't see it. It managed to come around the corner, and I was very aware that if it literally had flown over me, because of how delicately balanced I was, it was going to blow me off.
Our officer in charge spoke with the helicopter pilot, who had a very clear view of where the casualty was. The decision from the helicopter was that actually this isn't a rescue that they should attempt. If they got too close to the casualty, the downdraft from the helicopter, which is significant, could have quite simply blown them off the cliff. I didn't overhear the conversation between our officer in charge and the helicopter pilot, but I remember vividly one of the other officers tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Jake, you're going over." I remember looking over the edge of the cliff for the first time and suddenly feeling quite sick. I guess the enormity suddenly hit me of what I was about to do. I could see the paragliding wing stuck on the cliff below me. I couldn't see him, but I headed towards the wing. Arrived at the wing, I couldn't see him. I didn't know exactly where he was, but an officer on the radio kind of gave me a rough idea. I actually lifted the corner of the wing up so I could see further down the cliff, and there he was. He was stuck on a very small ledge with his hands round a rock.
I could start hearing the rescue team like rappelling down to me. I could hear Jake before I saw him, and he actually had climbed over my paraglider and had moved it out the way to say hello.
What surprised me about this casualty was he was very calm. I shouted down to him, "My name's Jake, I'm with the Coast Guard. Don't move, I'm going to come down to your location."
But they were not out of the woods yet, and after hours clinging on, Joe's calmness was cause for concern.
We sometimes see something called rescue collapse, which is where a casualty can relax in those moments before rescue, when they think they're about to be saved, and sometimes things can go wrong. We have a piece of equipment called a rescue harness, which is basically a big strap that wraps around your body under your arms and connects them into my system. Had I moved too quickly, there's a possibility that I could have actually pulled him off of the ledge.
There's a moment where I have to let go of the rock I'm holding and essentially hold on to Jake. But yeah, for a split second, my weight shifted off the rock. It's that feeling of, okay, like, this is it.
There was quite an uncomfortable moment where I had to move him off of the ledge he'd been standing on so that he was effectively hanging in front of me with his full weight on the ropes. At that point, I was able to fully connect the leg straps which complete the harness, ready for his journey back to the top of the cliff. At the point where we are ready for recovery, the officers who'd been keeping a watchful eye at the top of the cliff fitted a winch recovery system and were able to physically winch us back to the top of the cliff.
When I finally got over the top, I was very happy just to be stood up, back on level ground.
When we reached the top of the cliff, it was pure elation. It wasn't just me involved in this rescue. There was a whole team of people working very hard at the top of that cliff to bring this gentleman to safety.
What was more amazing is that Joe escaped with only minor injuries. He knows that the outcome could have been very different and will be forever grateful to those who saved him.
I'm really thankful for the Coast Guard team to rescue me. It's really important to have these teams help people like me.
In the waters off the Bahamas, a free diver got into serious trouble on a spearfishing trip with his brother.
I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, everything went wrong.
Having lost consciousness, his brother rushed to save him from drowning.
Just one thing on my mind, that was, go save him. I'm his dive partner. He's gonna lose consciousness, he's gonna sink, and he's gonna drown if I don't get him. Just go and save him. I dove down for him, and my mind was blank. My mind was just dive, get him, come back up.
Alex, he immediately pulled me back up to the surface.
And once I got him up, then I started to try to get him to react. So I took off his mask on his face, and I started to talk to him, breathe, breathe.
Breathe, Danny! Breathe, Danny! Danny, breathe! Danny, breathe!
I'm just like, Danny, breathe, Danny, breathe. Eventually, he takes a breath.
The last few times he maybe shouted to breathe, I kind of subconsciously heard it. And I think that's what kind of triggered me to start breathing again.
Breathe, breathe, what? Breathe, 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 breathe.
Once Danny regained consciousness, a lot of feelings hit me. Adrenaline definitely hit me. I could have just lost my brother. What could have happened if we both, passed out? What if I wasn't able to get him?
But Alex still had a job to do. He needed to get him to safety.
I swam him back to the boat. I took the hogfish from him, and then I passed it to my dad that was on the boat. I tried to compose myself.
My dad and my sister were all shaken up, my brother as well. So, I mean, we called it a day after that, and I immediately went to the hospital.
Danny may not have drowned in the sea, but he wasn't out of danger yet.
So we were scared that he could still drown within 24 hours. I was more fearful of the secondary drowning, which is basically your lungs are so filled with water that even though you're breathing, they're still not absorbing enough oxygen.
They did x-rays and stuff like that to see if there were any water or something in the lungs.
Because I was like, okay, I did my job, but now, he's gonna die. That was more fearful to me than the incident occurred.
I got the all clear, but I still stayed in the hospital for a few days just to make sure that everything was good.
The drama of that day seemed to affect Danny the least.
I wasn't really traumatized by the experience. I think it was more my brother and my dad and my sister. Every time I dive, they would always be on the lookout even more after the incident happened.
It took me a while to actually compose myself, not just that day, but it took me quite a few months to actually regain that composure that I once had.
But the event has had an impact on both brothers.
I think things happen for a reason, and that definitely happened for a reason. I think it made us more safe divers, and he definitely learned his threshold that he shouldn't go over.
I'm thankful towards my brother that he was there that day and at the right place at the right time. He got me back to regain my consciousness and help me back up to the surface. I mean, only the worst could happen if he wasn't there and he wasn't paying attention. I probably wouldn't be here today, to tell the story.
Earlier, a husband was single-handedly fighting off intruders to protect his wife. But the situation was looking increasingly dangerous as the burglars weren't about to give up.
Asif?
In their home in London, his business associates could only listen in shock as they heard what was going on via their video call. The police had been called, but until they arrived, Asif was on his own, fighting off the intruders.
I didn't expect me to, turn around and starting to fight with them. I never even thought about for a second of my safety. It was all to do with my wife.
And it looked like his one-man defense was working, as the attackers seemed to be almost out of the house.
First one, he didn't want to know. He was like cowering against the door. And they then retreated to see what they were going to do next.
But they weren't giving up yet, and things were about to turn even more threatening.
At that point, I was trying to shut the patio door closed. One of them held it open on the other side, and then one of them pulled out, which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
He ran back past the screen, and we're like, oh my God, Asif, are you okay? Are you okay? And obviously he didn't, he literally just whoosh, past the screen and then whoosh, back again.
Fearful for his life and adrenaline pumping, Asif ran to the kitchen to find something to protect himself with.
He followed me in. I grabbed 2 kitchen knives and turned around and looked at him.
Luckily for him, this tactic worked.
He then closed the kitchen door and then he then walked out. So at this point, I think they didn't want to know.
But the men weren't about to leave quietly as they attacked again.
2 of them holding big bricks. One of them dropped the brick and then he ran off first. And then the other one who was holding the brick threw it at the patio door. Fortunately for us, we have got protective glass, so it's not come through, but should that have been any normal glass, that would have come through and probably knocked me out.
Upstairs, Charlotte was panicking about what might be happening.
I didn't know what it was, I just heard a massive bang, so at that point I did go downstairs, and what I thought I could do, I honestly don't know, but there was no way I could stay upstairs hearing that sort of noise.
As I've gone outside to see where they've gone, Charlotte had come down the stairs, so she then somehow appeared outside, and I just sort of was pushing her to go back inside to make sure she was safe.
It was a sigh of relief completely that I could see Asif, you know, stood up. He was absolutely fine and unharmed, and I was still on the phone to the police trying to get the story across and communicate as well at the same time.
But there was a complication, meaning help hadn't reached them yet.
Unfortunately for us, the police went to the wrong address because so many different neighbours had phoned because the screaming and shouting was so much that no one knew where exactly it was coming from.
While they awaited the police, the community rallied round the couple.
The next door neighbours came round to check that we were okay, and then another neighbour visited as well. But it was reassuring that people had come round and they do care.
And there were still 2 other people anxious to know if the couple was safe.
And I could hear the Skype calls, is everything all right, is everything all right? And then I realised the call was still going, so I just sort of said, I'm going to have to come back to you.
Once the call was ended, what happened to them? We didn't know whether the people had left or if Charlotte was okay. Obviously, Asif had been, you know, okay enough to come and switch off the call. It was just insane, and like we could hardly sleep that night, really.
When the police finally arrived, you know, when we watched the footage back and showed them, they said well done to Asif, you know, for what he did.
But when they could finally take stock of the terrifying ordeal, it hit home for the couple just how lucky they were.
All that kept going through my mind is that it could have ended up in such a different way, and I could have lost my husband over it, but so courageous at the same time that he put his life at risk just to save me.
That I've been in the street and I'm walking down the street and 3 blokes come at me, I'd probably turn around and run. But if they've come into my home, my wife's there was nothing, you know, whether there were going to be 5, 6, 7 of them. There was never going to get past me to hurt my wife.
Belongings can be replaced, people can't. I was upstairs, helpless, and he just wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, nobody came anywhere near me.
Earlier, we saw a paraglider pilot rescued by the Coast Guard team in Dorset, in the UK. A year later, and Jake and the team from the West Bay Coast Guard are about to meet up with the man they saved that day for the first time.
Really good to see you.
Cool. How long has it been? Like a year now?
It's been a year.
Has it actually been a year?
Let me introduce you to Gemma.
Yeah, Gemma.
Yeah,
Hi.
Gemma operated your main line that day.
Did she?
Alan operated the safety.
Alan. Nice to meet you.
This is Rob, our senior
Nice
coastal officer who's responsible for our training. That was the first time that I've rescued someone who is precarious. And I said to the guys earlier, that was the calmest casualty that I ever could have wished for. We've done quite a few cliff rescues before, mainly of dogs, but this is the first time I've been involved with someone in such a precarious and life-threatening position.
You came, you like, hey, can I move this? I was like, yeah, you can move the paraglider. Like, you had to like peek underneath, you remember?
Yeah, I couldn't see you until I lifted that wing. I remember looking through and you were literally both hands around the rock.
Yeah, good to have a guy with a rope come down and get you. Well, thank you very much.
No, our pleasure.
Meeting up with Joe has reinforced to Jake the reason why he volunteers.
I think it's a great privilege to be able to help anyone who is in danger, and it makes you feel incredibly proud.
But the accident hasn't put Joe off flying, and he didn't waste time getting back to the sport he loves.
It's taken perhaps a week or 2 to get over the crash, but I was back in the air. Next weekend I was flying Eep again. It was like, get back on the horse, you know, be careful, play it safe, keep flying.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me.
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. A tourist keen to try hang gliding is left hanging on for dear life.
We got lined up. As soon as my feet left the ground, gravity just took me straight down.
He soon discovers the reason.
Something was not right. I fell completely downward.
He wasn't attached to the hang glider.
We were getting closer to the ground and I was losing grip.
Waiting for him to land, his wife had no idea he was in dire trouble.
He looked up to the sky to see where my husband was going to land. My pilot told me that he had already landed and needs to go to the hospital.
In the UK, a woman targeted by car thieves is saved by two broomstick-wielding heroes.
So the woman is screaming. Without thinking, called my other colleague, come around and say, come outside.
The lady, she was on the floor, and the two guys trying to rob the car.
In the UK, a much-loved family pet disappears on his daily walk.
I couldn't hear him rustling in a bush. I couldn't hear him panting.
Getting himself stuck in a narrow pipe. But after 3 days, his chances of coming out alive are slim.
I arranged where we could dig away from where the dog was trapped in the hope that it was still alive.
And off the southeast coast of America, a cargo ship has capsized with 24 people still on board.
My mind was just reeling. Am I having a bad dream?
The Coast Guard is on its way, but a rescue will not be easy.
As we approached the scene, I could start making the outline of the ship. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really happening.
A couple on holiday in Switzerland have a hang gliding experience that leaves one of them hanging on for dear life.
If I lose my grip, I'm a goner. There's no way I'm going to survive this.
He told me that was the closest to death he had ever come.
Chris and Gail Gerksey from Florida have been married for 27 years. They share a hunger for adventure.
We both have an equal passion for being outdoors and trying new things.
Me and Gail have been in many adventures. Every time we travel, we like to do something a little different on one of the days.
Some vacations are fine just laying on the beach, but other times we like to do something a little adventurous, jet skiing, snowmobiling.
We've been up on a hot air balloon. Normally we've been ziplining. We've ziplined in many places.
Chris is a bit more of a daredevil than I am.
For my 40th birthday, she had purchased me a skydiving excursion, which was really cool.
I don't jump out of airplanes.
The couple were looking forward to their next adventure to Switzerland. First stop was the alpine village of Interlaken, a mecca for thrill seekers, and there was one activity the couple both had their eye on.
I did hear about the hang gliding in Interlaken, and doing my research, it seemed like the best place to do it.
She showed me, and I was all in. It looked very cool. We were excited. From everything we've seen, it just looked like a beautiful place. We were excited to get here, and we were excited to try hang gliding for our first time and go tour the country.
Despite some last-minute jitters from Gail, the hike up the mountain to the takeoff spot blew them both away.
I was a bit nervous about going hang gliding for the first time. Once we got up the mountain and you could see the beautiful views and everything, I just decided it was going to be gorgeous and to go for it.
The visibility was awesome. You can see across the valley to the next mountain, both lakes in Interlaken. It was just perfect flying conditions. We were really, really psyched to go.
First, though, the all-important briefing from the pilots.
The instructors were great. They seemed to really know how to make us feel at ease and go through each of the steps on how we were going to take off and land.
The pilots were walking us through every step and hooking up, putting our harnesses on, and they were explaining everything as they were going. We practiced a couple times standing next to each other and doing the run. You're supposed to run side by side until your feet leave the ground.
Everything seemed to be organized and safe, and they were very assuring.
My wife got hooked up to her glider. Gail took off with her pilot already. She left first.
I think I looked back before we took off, and I just said, "I'll see you later."
With his wife safely in the air, it was Chris's turn for takeoff.
We walked over to the launch area, and we lined up, and it was like, "Are you ready? Go, go, go!" And then we ran until our feet left the ground.
But things were about to go terribly wrong.
Something was not right with my hookup. I fell completely downward. I was supposed to fly right next to the pilot. Gravity just took me straight down. I had to really just grab onto anything I could. Figured out that I wasn't attached to the hang glider.
Later, Chris will need to use every bit of his resolve to survive the mid-air emergency.
If I lose my grip, I'm a goner. There's no way I'm going to survive this.
In the UK, a woman is under attack at a petrol station by two men who are determined to steal her car. But her attack is being captured on CCTV, and two members of staff aren't prepared to just stand by and watch. Friends Cameron and Risalit work at their local petrol station in Birmingham, and it's more than just a job to them.
The people who are working here, it's like a family. Me and Risalit work together is more than 3 years now.
See you later. Okay, thank you.
He's a very kind with the customer, with me, with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Working as a team, he's a very nice person, honest, and very brave.
But what they didn't know is that this bravery would be put to the test when they were on an early morning shift.
I was working inside. He was working on till. I was working in an office.
Outside, on the forecourt, a customer was filling her car with fuel. All was quiet as the customer made her way inside to pay.
Outside was really quiet, so it was dark as well.
But as the woman made her way back to her car, two menacing figures appeared and ran towards her. Within seconds, she was thrown to the ground and her car was moments from being taken. Hearing the woman's screams, Risalit was alerted to the unfolding drama outside.
So when the woman is screaming, and quickly, without thinking, I called my other colleague, come around and say, come outside.
Come outside, it definitely means something happened outside in the forecourt.
As they ran to help the woman, they grabbed whatever was to hand on the way. The colleagues made their way out as fast as possible and wasted no time in confronting the attackers.
The lady, she was on the floor, and the two guys trying to rob the car.
With little thought for their own safety, they ran to the woman's rescue.
I never think anything, they have a knife, anything, because I haven't got time to think.
We didn't think about our own safety because we are thinking about that lady.
But could they help the woman and save her car before the thieves escaped?
So I shout, say, get off, woman. So when they saw they coming with broomstick, they run. They left the ladies and run.
With the carjackers long gone, Rizlet and Cameron made their way back to check the woman was okay.
She was crying and was really shocked and scared. So I asked they took anything from you. She told us basically they want the keys. It was really, that is very shocking. That is very dangerous.
Still a little bit scary as well, because police, you can't catch them.
But these friends have no regrets and would do the same again.
The lady was in danger, so I thought my job to save the woman.
Aim of my life is to help the other people as well.
If anything happen again, so I will do again. My family, they're proud of me.
And it's good for us, when the people are saying, oh yes, you are a hero, you've done a great job. It's very nice for us.
Off the coast of America, a cargo container carrying 4,000 cars and 24 crew members has capsized.
My mind was just reeling. Am I having a bad dream? How many people are we talking about, and how are we going to get the people off the ship?
And just when a rescue attempt is thought to have succeeded, the worst news was to come.
To know that there remained 4 people inside that ship made me feel even worse.
Brunswick, Georgia, on the southeast coast of America, is one of the busiest ports in the country when it comes to the import and export of cars.
Each week there's probably between 10 to 12 of those vehicles, carriers moving in and out of the Port of Brunswick.
One such carrier is the Golden Ray, a 72,000-ton cargo ship bound for the Middle East. Just after midnight, it leaves Brunswick Port with 4,000 new cars and 24 crew members on board. But after only 23 minutes at sea, disaster strikes. Captain John Reed was to oversee the rescue operation.
Received a call from the captain of the port who told me he had received an initial report that a ro-ro vessel, a roll-on, roll-off vessel, had capsized on its way out of Brunswick. And my mind was just reeling. Am I having a bad dream? How many people are we talking about, and how are we going to get the people off the ship?
But this was no dream. This was a nightmare. With 24 lives at stake, Captain Reed dispatched his rescue teams. First to reach the scene is Pilot Lieutenant Rob Minnow.
As we approached the scene, I could start making the outline of the ship. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really happening.
This is now a race to save lives. The Golden Ray is rapidly taking on water, could sink at any moment, and locating its 24 crewmen is proving a difficult task.
We were able to establish communication with the Coast Guard vessel and a tugboat on scene to assess where all the survivors were at. There was a lot of radio chatter going on, and it was really hard to identify locations of the crew members on that ship.
But a rapid rescue operation is imperative, as by now, the Golden Ray is listing dangerously.
We didn't know the stability of it, and you're looking at this boat that's 70 to 80 degrees on its side. So we decided we wanted to keep our swimmer connected to the aircraft on the hoist hook.
Any maneuver by the rescue helicopter needs to be handled with precision.
We were able to approach the first crew member from about 150 feet above the water, again 70 to 80 feet above the vessel.
But every move Lieutenant Minnow makes could impact the stranded crew still on board the capsized craft.
As we get lower, our rotor wash can impact the vessel and start to turn it. Naturally, with a 656-foot container ship, it's not going to affect it that much. However, for the people that were up on the deck railing, less rotor wash that you're putting on them gives them a better chance of not losing any kind of footing or handhold.
And lowering the rescue swimmer to the waiting survivors is proving difficult for the flight mechanic.
He doesn't have night vision goggles on because It's difficult to hoist that way, but he's, trying to position this swimmer almost 130 feet below the aircraft in the dark, in between multiple obstructions. Fortunately, our first person that we hoisted was on the starboard bridge wing, and they had a flashlight.
Locating the first survivor is one thing. Hoisting him back to the helicopter is far more dangerous.
Any kind of small movement you make up at altitude turns into a much larger swinging motion at the bottom. Our great concern was not to move the aircraft around as much, and when it's nighttime, it makes things pretty challenging.
With the first successful rescue, the crew worked through the night to reach the others. But just as they thought they had everyone, they got the worst news. 4 crew members were still on board. Worse still, they were trapped inside one of the most inaccessible parts of the ship, the engine room. Later, the fate of the remaining 4 crew hangs in the balance.
We were tapping on the ship, and that was probably 10:30 or 11 in the morning, and we got no responses.
In the UK, a spaniel is trapped underground in a pipe. He's been there for 3 days, and his family are desperate to get him back. His whimpers are getting fainter, and the hope of him surviving with no food or water is getting more doubtful by the hour.
I never wanted to give up on him, but every which way I turned, a door was closing. There was no way of finding him.
Help is on the way from an unusual source, and they are pulling out all the stops to try and save him.
I put my phone on, and the next thing I know, I've got an emergency call coming in telling me there's a dog stuck up a pipe. So I thought, oh God, what do I do here?
The Athy family live in Oxfordshire. Mum Kat, Dad James, along with their 3 boys, and their 6-year-old dog Spencer, or Spenny for short.
Spenny is my Cocker Spaniel, who is rather crazy. He loves water, he loves running, he loves chasing, he loves being with his boys and his family.
Come on, Spen, let's go walkies. Come on.
And for busy swimming teacher Kat, one of the nicest parts of the day is walking with Spencer.
Come on.
Spenny loves the walk. As soon as you say the word walk at home, his ears will prick up, he will do that little head where he puts it to the side, and he's desperate to go. He loves to be off lead, he's running around, he's in and out of the bushes, his nose is to the ground sniffing everything. He just loves being outside.
You good boy, come on.
And luckily for them, one of his favourite walks is in the local park, only 2 minutes from their house.
Come on. Tilsey Park is quite wooded. It's got some little areas where you can go off and there's quite a lot of bushes. You can tiptoe across streams. The walk also leads on to a much bigger walk all the way up to Sunning Wells.
Come on.
I know that Spenny can't get himself into too much mischief around here. He can go for a swim when it's hot. There's lots of little trails to do, and the kids love coming here as well.
But one day, whilst out for their usual walk, Spenny did get into some mischief, and it was to turn their world upside down.
It was Saturday afternoon, and we had plans to go to the cinema, so we thought we'd walk Spencer quickly just before we went. Walked across to Tilsey Park. You gonna jump up? Up. Let him off as I normally would, and went for our walk.
Come on. Off you go.
We went over a little bridge, and I whistled at him, and he didn't come. I couldn't hear him rustling in a bush. I couldn't hear him panting.
With panic setting in, Kat called a friend to help her search.
Went back to where I had originally lost him, and I could hear this faint whimpering. howling noise coming from somewhere, but as I moved, the sound stopped. So if I stood in a particular position, I could hear it. So I went down to the ditch and into the ditch. I could hear his crying much more loudly. Had a little rummage around in all the undergrowth and found the opening to a pipe. When I uncovered the pipe, you could hear his howling and you could hear it coming from there. Called the emergency services and they could hear him as well. They tried with their cameras, they tried to find the end of the pipe, but we couldn't locate him.
With night falling and the rescue services unable to locate Spencer, the decision was taken to suspend the search until the next day. But after a sleepless night, there was still no sign of Spencer. And after another day of searching, Kat turned to social media.
We had got in contact with a local group on Facebook who kind of spread the word about a lost animal, and so lots of help was coming. We met with the fire brigade and they came down to try and help us locate the pipe because, of course, it was dark, so it was really tricky to see everything.
Fearing the worst and knowing that time was not on their side, they were reluctantly about to call it a night for the second time.
Never wanted to give up on him, but every which way I turned, a door was closing. There was no way of finding him, and by this time he'd stopped making noise.
Later, a desperate plea on social media brings last-minute hope from a special robot camera.
They said, "Let me try and get your dog out." And I thought, if you want to come and try, you can come and try. I'm willing to try anything.
High above the Alpine mountains in Switzerland, a thrill-seeking couple were trying hang gliding for the first time, but one of them quickly found themselves in trouble.
As soon as my feet left the ground, I was supposed to fly above. I fell completely downward.
Then he made a terrifying discovery.
Quickly after that, I figured out that I wasn't attached to the hang glider.
Chris was now left holding on for his life in midair.
I was just looking to grab onto anything I can. I had a grip on one of his harness grabs. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna get through this.
At this point, the pilot had become aware of the unfolding emergency and took action.
He grabbed at the back of my harness a couple times, and I just, I kind of knew that it was just me holding on.
The pilot had a dilemma. He needed to keep hold of Chris, but he also needed to steer both of them in an emergency landing.
At first, when he was grabbing onto my harness, he was trying to fly with one hand. We made a quick right turn over some houses. I think because my weight was pulling down so hard on one side, I think he was having some difficulty trying to fly it.
Chris suddenly became aware of his surroundings.
That first time I looked down and I said, if I lose my grip, I'm a goner. There's no way I'm gonna survive this, or I'll, be in really, really bad shape. So I just tried to concentrate with everything I had and just hold on. Once I got a hold of the bar that went across, which is the landing gear bar, I locked down with my left hand and my right hand, just looking to grab onto anything I can. I had a grip on one of his harness grabs, and I was just trying to figure out how I'm gonna, get through this.
The worst thoughts were flashing through his mind.
I pictured one time in my head of me falling through the air.
But he quickly resolved to fight.
Right after that, I just decided that that's not gonna happen and held on as long as I could.
Trying to stay positive, Chris couldn't dismiss the reality that they were now hurtling towards a town, searching for a safe place to land.
My pilot was kind of trying to beeline it down to the ground as quickly as he could. He was telling me to hold on, to hang, to grab here. I just couldn't get a good grip with, so as the farther we were going, the farther my right hand was getting down his shoulder, then his side, and then at the very end, I was holding onto the fabric of his pant leg on the back, so that really wasn't doing much for me.
As Chris was starting to lose his grip, the pilot was his only hope.
He was grabbing onto my safety harness and trying to hold on to me there. At one point, he had to let go totally because we were getting closer to the ground and he needed more control on the glider.
Chris was struggling, but knew that a fall even from that height would be fatal.
We were getting closer to the ground and I was losing grip with my left hand. When I saw the ground coming up, we were getting closer and closer, and I think another 5 seconds, I would have let loose no matter how high I was.
Having almost made it to the safety of the grass, Chris's ordeal wasn't over yet.
Once my feet scraped the ground is when it pulled my grip free. I was still holding on when my feet did hit the ground. We were coming in probably, I would say, about 45 miles an hour. So it'd be like jumping out of a car. I kind of hit the ground hard and I tumbled a few times. I sat up and I looked down at my wrist and it was all bulged out and I knew it was broken.
Meanwhile, Gail had landed and was unaware of Chris's terrifying ordeal.
My flight was absolutely breathtaking. Really had the feeling of flying like a bird. My landing was perfect. I looked up to the sky to see where my husband was going to land. My pilot told me that he had already landed. Once I did see him, as they pulled the van up, he was holding his arm, so I knew something was either fractured badly or broken badly. When they told me he was going to the hospital, yeah, I didn't know the extent of his injuries at that time. I was still calm at that point, just trying to figure out what was going on.
When they reached the hospital, Gail and Chris finally had a chance to talk.
He told me that was the closest to death he had ever come, and I was like, why? And that it was that point that he told me that he was not attached to the glider.
In the emergency room, Chris's injuries became apparent.
When I impacted the ground, I broke the top of my bone in my arm outward because I impacted pretty hard. And so I had to have a titanium plate and 7 screws installed. And then I had a torn bicep tendon on my left side because I was, I guess, holding on so long that I tore my bicep tendon.
However, Chris knew he was lucky to have escaped with his life, knowing how close he'd come to facing death.
We were taking x-rays. I was, gonna need surgery, but, I was alive and I was getting taken care of, so I was just trying to keep positive.
And his fighting spirit remained strong, despite the harrowing events of their first day on holiday.
We thought about leaving and going home, but Chris said, no, we're gonna finish out our trip and try to enjoy what we had left.
I was extremely lucky that day. It was, like winning the lottery of life, I guess.
Back in the waters off the coast of Georgia, USA, a mission is underway to rescue 24 crew members of a sinking cargo ship. But devastating news has reached the rescue team. 4 crew members are still trapped on board. As the dawn breaks and the 4 missing crew remain trapped, the situation takes a horrifying turn when fire breaks out.
I looked up at the side of the boat and it just started to billow smoke, just huge plumes of smoke. It felt like being in a movie at first, just watching this smoke screen start to develop. We just happened to be downwind of it, and very quickly I realized that the smoke was starting to come our way and was going to envelop us.
Rescuing the remaining trapped crew members is now looking bleak.
The sun was coming up, and to see that ship there on the horizon, laying on its side, just made my heart sink. And to know that there remained 4 people inside that ship made me feel even a little worse, because the fire and smoke were really what kind of had us back off.
forced to retreat, the helicopters would need to wait until the fire eventually died down to make another approach and board the hull.
A representative of the ship was out there with us, an engineer. He said, let's give it a shot. Let's go ahead and tap on the ship. And we were tapping on the ship, and that was probably 10:30 or 11 in the morning. So nearly 9 hours plus after, and we got no responses. We could hear cars crashing down inside every now and then, but we did not hear tapbacks.
There's the chance that this rescue attempt has come too late, and the crew has already perished. But the team are not willing to give up, and their tenacity is about to pay off.
That afternoon, crews out there continued to do it and started getting a reply. You would tap 3 times and you would get 3 back. You would tap 4 times and they would get 4 back. And to hear that they had made taps was just a game changer, really, for everyone. To know that, hey, we're not just dealing with a ship now. There's still people alive.
With renewed hope, engineers are drafted in to penetrate the thick metal hull in a bid to reach the men. Once again, the Coast Guard helicopter plays its part. Its pilot is Crystal Barnett.
We had heard, hey, we have contact with the crew inside, and that was a huge release because it's like, oh, you have contact with the crew, yes, and we have contact with all 4, and they're all alive. So that was definitely like very elating, happy moment. Everybody was really relieved, like, wow, we're not going to have to even cut into a different part of the ship, and they're confirming that all 4 people are alive in the same location, which is honestly kind of lucky that they're all there together and supporting each other in that really horrible environment.
But the relief is short-lived.
The time became critical because I'm getting the readings that we're getting from the space where the guys are at, and it's telling me, hey, there's a problem here with the air that can't support life.
They must cut through the hull and fast. But first, the helicopter needs to get close to the area to drop a salvage crew, and that isn't easy.
We've definitely trained to land on small areas and structures like that, but definitely it's a unique place to land that it's an overturned vessel. We ended up doing 5 total landings. I kept power on the aircraft, and I didn't put all of the weight down of the aircraft. So if something were to happen for some reason, we'd have an easy out, just pick right back up and fly away. Once they cut into the ship, they realized that the air quality in the hull was so bad that it was creating a explosive hazard. So when they were cutting into the ship, they had to kind of keep that clear for the sparking hazard. And then also, knowing that the crew inside was breathing very toxic air, they immediately wanted to start blowing fresh air. And so a lot of the equipment that we delivered to the boat was actually leaf blowers, the backpack style leaf blowers that you would use on your lawn. We delivered those so they could blow air into the hole that they cut so that the air would be fresher for the crew members trapped inside.
As the day progresses, the team continue with their efforts and eventually create enough of a hole to access the ship.
It was 140 degrees plus Fahrenheit. For those crews going in and out of the hole that had been cut. Initially, it was just a scope hole to put something in there, confirm that there were people alive and they were in the right spot. And then they were able to drill a larger hole, which was about a 3-inch hole, and put water through and be able to push air, clean air, into the space where the men were at.
Finally, after 30 hours and the tireless efforts of the rescue teams, the remaining 4 crew members are free.
Woo! Yeah!
When that last guy came out, and I asked all those guys to stand up there so I could get a picture, and I just said, hey, you guys made it possible, and you've just made the best day of my career. And it truly was.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, his family haven't given up hope for a safe return, but time is running out.
I never wanted to give up on him, but every which way I turned, a door was closing.
A desperate cat turned once again to social media for help, posting on a local site. This resulted in more offers of assistance, including one that surprised everyone.
I then had a message from Thames Water, and they said, let me try and get your dog out. And I thought, if you want to come and try, you can come and try. I'm willing to try anything.
And true to their word, they turned out that night, sending their contractors.
They had a camera that was on a robot that they put into the end of the pipe. As the robot was going through the pipe, we were all stood there watching the little TV screen in the back of the Thames Water van. And as it kept going through the pipe, it went for over 100 metres, and suddenly you saw Spencer's bottom. You could see that he was shivering and shaking, which was the best news because it meant that he was alive.
But although they could see Spencer, there was nothing they could do till daylight, and it meant another sleepless night for Kat.
Hello, Jason Major speaking.
The next morning, it was Jason Major, a fields operations specialist for Thames Water, who took the call from the team monitoring the pipe.
Head over there now. All right, cheers. Bye.
I came to work on the Monday, I put my phone on, and the next thing I know, I've got an emergency call coming in telling me there's a dog stuck up a pipe. So I thought, oh God, what do I do here? And I looked at the mapping. I could see it actually wasn't one of our pipes. So I then had to go in and initiate exactly where the problem is, which was underneath one of the AstroTurf football pitches. So I said, whatever we could do, we must get this dog out somehow.
But to get Spencer out, they would need to dig up the pitch. And for that, they would need permission from the owners, Tisley Park.
I arranged where we could dig away from where the dog was trapped in the hope that it was still alive. And then once we got the pipe exposed, we cut our window. I wasn't sure whether the dog was alive or not because the camera footage, he was just not moving at all.
I was invited in as they then removed the last part of the pipe. I then got down into the hole and my arm was just that little bit too short to reach Spencer.
I had quite a long arm, so I spoke to Kat and I said, has he got a tail? She said, well, he's got a little stump. So I thought, great, I've got something I can sort of grab hold of. So I managed to get my arm up the pipe and got hold of his tail. Once I started to give him a little pull, he had a little moan, so I could tell he was alive. So I thought, thank God for that, you know. It was great, you know, to see him alive and to hand him to Kat. She was so over the moon that he was okay and safe.
And he was shaking and muddy and filthy, but he was very pleased to see me. It was the moment that I've been waiting for 3 days.
And a year later, Spencer has made a full recovery from his adventure.
He is very much back to normal. You wouldn't think that he'd been through a stressful ordeal. The only thing I do is I don't leave him in the dark. I think that's more down to me. I think if I'd been in the dark for 3 days, I wouldn't want to be in the dark, so I always make sure I leave a light on at bedtime.
A Florida couple were hang gliding on holiday in Switzerland when disaster struck.
We were getting closer to the ground and I was losing grip.
After an emergency landing, he was lucky to escape with just a broken wrist and a torn tendon. A couple of months later, he was finally able to watch his brush with death.
I told the story before I saw the video to my friends and family, and I was trying to see how accurate my story was watching the video.
But it's still not an easy watch for Gail.
It gives me anxiety, and just watching him switch his grips so many times and almost fall to his death was, you know, petrifying.
Chris made a video of his experience, and it went around the world.
The video going viral was a shock to me, and it was like 4 million views in 2 days. And
Someone who saw the video and was keen to fulfill Chris's dream was Interlaken tourism manager Natalie Rothlin.
I first saw Chris on social media, and it really impressed me how he handled the whole situation. I contacted him because I wanted him to get another experience of Interlaken and not to last it with the bad memories.
But it was not without a few nerves.
I was a little apprehensive about coming back and doing it again, but I knew that we probably needed to do this so we can really just move forward.
A year later, and the day has arrived for the couple to return to Interlaken for their second hang gliding flight.
Hi Chris, I'm Natalie. Oh, let's see. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, I'm Natalie.
Very good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. You're a bit nervous of your flight today? Not a little bit. Okay.
2 days ago.
You will be landing at the...
Yeah, we down.
Being back at the exact same takeoff location brought mixed feelings.
It is quite surreal being back here to the same spot that we launched from before. Feeling good about it, and then, you know, the butterflies came in a little bit because I was looking down the same runway that I did the original time, and, you know, memories were coming back in my head, so.
In my wildest dreams, I didn't think we would come back a year later, but I'm here now, and it's going to be good.
It was time to fight the nerves and take flight, but not without a rigid check of his harness.
We all checked that we were attached before we flew.
Once we did take off, though, it was absolutely fabulous.
And we're gonna run on 3, 2, 1, and go, and run, 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 run. Off we go, hello.
Really, really good to see him take off and just soar away like you're supposed to on a hang glider.
I felt my harness tugging on my safety vest, so I was quite sure that I was properly hooked up this time.
Nerves turned into joy, definitely, when I took off. Just took it all in. The views were spectacular.
It is extremely beautiful. You're effortlessly flying through the air. I'll do it again in a heartbeat. It was cool. Yeah, everybody needs to try that at least once.
After successfully completing the flight, Chris and Gail's faith in adventure is now fully restored.
We would definitely do it again, yeah.
We may take lessons now.
You never know.